Okay, I got 6 o'clock. Call the meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Irvin?
Here.
Counselor Savage? Here. Counselor Fleck?
Here.
Counselor Soulsby? Here. Counselor Roberts?
Here.
Counselor Stennett? Mayor Gowing?
Here.
Committee member Amanda Gilbert? Here. Danny Soulsby?
Here.
Gary Manley?
Here.
Gary Williams?
Here.
Don Rust?
Here.
Armando Garza?
Here.
Dana Meredith?
Here. Okay, item 3 is election of budget committee officers. So last year, Councilor Roberts was the vice chair and Amanda Gilbert was secretary. So I'd like to entertain a motion that Councilor Roberts be the chair, Amanda Gilbert the vice chair, and Dana Meredith the secretary. So moved. Second. We have a motion with a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Who was second?
I guess I should ask opposed.
He's going to need the mic.
Shall I call order? Yeah, you take off with item 4. You got.
Thank you. I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Budget Committee. First thing, I guess we approved the minutes of the May 6, 2021 and May 11, 2021 Budget Committee meeting. Serving.
Second.
All right, we have a motion with a second. All say aye.
Aye.
So, approved. Number 5, Budget Committee member declarations. Yes, Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilor
I'd
Fleck.
like to declare that I work for a community sharing program. Community sharing has a line item in the community promotion section of the budget. I will recuse myself if any discussion around that item comes up.
Thank you, Councilor Fleck. Yes, Amanda Gilbert.
I work for the Coastal Climate Watershed Council, and we're included in wastewater and the water treatment section.
So said. Anybody else? Mr. Manley, sir?
I work for Southland Wheels, and we're mentioned on page 57 and page 94 in the budget. So I'll recuse myself from those discussions.
So noted. Thank you. Anybody else? Number 6, receive the proposed budget and measure. City Manager, Richard Myers.
So first logistic item I want to mention is there's some microphones that are pointed up in the air. Please move those so they're pointed to you and share them amongst yourselves so that we can hear you on the recording. So please. You'll notice just off before I read the budget message, you'll notice the budget looks a little different than previous years. For those of you who have been on for a number of years, we made a number of improvements. We cleaned it up, added some new colors, actually added some more information included in the budget. There are some changes to some of the information that is included now as a result of some information from the Government Finances Officers Association, and there are requirements for getting a budget award. And so we're kind of preparing for the future. We probably won't do it for this one, but it's for future years that we may try to apply for the Government Finance Officers Association annual award for budget preparation. We do get that a lot for the audit, and we've got a whole box of the plaques downstairs in the basement because they actually act like giant dominoes if we put them up on the counter. So they're in a box. So hopefully the information is useful for you. You'll notice one item that is significantly different is the personnel services summary that's on page 35. In previous years, it was a little confusing the way it was set up. This is a format from the Government Finance Officers Association that they recommend. And it's a little cleaner and easier to follow the different positions with the city. And you can see the changes in personnel over the year from the previous budget. So I will present my budget message. Dear Mayor, City Council, and Budget Committee members, attached is the 2022-23 proposed budget for your consideration. As always, the purpose of this budget message is to introduce the proposed budget, provide some background information, and supply a brief overview of the document. I welcome a much more detailed discussion as the Budget Committee reviews the document. The world has certainly changed from last year at this time when we were preparing the current budget. We have actually pulled out of the pandemic, although numbers are getting high again, but it's not as drastic as it was. And we've begun some recovery. The American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, the largest federal distribution of funds to state and local governments in recent history, has occurred. We are facing the highest inflation numbers in 40 years, employment shortages, supply chain challenges, product and material shortages, political and social divisiveness, and international conflicts. Among this current community and global environment, we have prepared this 22-23 proposed budget. The budget is our attempt to address the needs of the community while facing the uncertain impacts of everything that is going on in the world today and what might occur in the next 14 months. The proposed 2022-23 proposed budget for the City of Cottage Grove is, as required by Oregon law, a balanced budget. Expenditures for all funds total $46,258,251, an increase of $5,937,508 from the 2021-22 budget. When the ARPA carryover and second tranche, that's the fancy word from the federal government for second distribution, of $2,326,005, and the community center remaining roof loan proceeds of $830,000, and half of the Main Street EDA grant funds, $2,500,000, are subtracted out of the proposed budget. The total 22-23 proposed budget is $40,602,246, which is only $281,000 and $1,503 more than the 2021-22 budget. So when we take out those major revenues that are coming in, we've put in the EDA grant. We don't know if we've received it yet. Things look very positive, and we should be hearing sometime this spring, summer maybe, whether we've received that grant. And so we've put it in the budget so that we can get moving right away when it comes, because we'll have some design work to do, and then we need to get construction moving and get it finished within next year's budget, the next year's budget after this one. So we want to get started as quick as we can. The city's permanent rate continues to be $7.2087 per thousand of assessed value. This proposed budget was prepared using the city's full permanent tax levy. The city may levy less than the full rate without jeopardizing future opportunities to levy the full rate. However, the revenue that could be generated cannot be recovered in a future year. The proposed full levy is estimated to generate $5,300,000 of collectible tax revenue, $250,000 more than the budgeted property tax revenue in 21-22. Again, this year we have budgeted for only a 2% taxable value increase. We believe this is very conservative, and we'll see the full 3% assessed value increase because assessed values is about 52% of the real market value. It would take a pretty significant drop in the real market value to hit the assessed and reduce that. A major piece of this proposed budget is the use of the ARPA funds. Some ARPA funds have been used in this current budget we're in. The remainder of the first tranche and second tranche that will be coming in September of 22 have been accounted for in the 22-23 proposed budget. Now, I did say will be coming. There are some rumblings on the national level that there might be some efforts to claw back some of that tranche, that second tranche. Because there's some projects that the federal government wants to do, and there's discussions that they may claw back, which means they'll take back some of that money that they haven't allocated out yet and do that. The National League of Cities and League of Oregon Cities and other leagues and everybody are not happy with that and are expressing their dissatisfaction with some of those rumors that are going around. So we'll see if it happens, but that's just something to be thinking about and considering, that even though we budgeted that full amount, it may not all come. It probably will, but may not. The city Cottage Grove elected to take the standard allowance, which dramatically simplifies the record keeping and use of the ARPA funds for small jurisdictions. By electing the standard allowances, Cottage Grove can spend the entire ARPA fund allotment on any service traditionally provided by government with a few specific limitations. The funds must be spent or obligated prior to December 31st, 2024, and the city's ARPA funds have been spent in the current budget and are budgeted in the 2022-23 proposed budget as follows. And I'm not going to read the chart. You can see the chart there. Basically, it's lined out in how we are currently spending or have spent some of the money in the current fund budget and the carryover amount, and then what would be in the future budget in the proposed. And they're noted on this chart which funds they are in, so you can find that easily when we go to those different funds as well. Even while using the standard allowance, above uses of the ARPA funds attempts to meet the general guidelines for the use of the ARPA funds. The broad range of uses will have a wide impact across the entire community and invest in services or projects for years to come. Some of the expenditures that are in here that we've budgeted and allocated ARPA funds, if we did not use the standard allowance, we would not be able to use them for that. Street construction, for example, was not included in the ARPA funds if you didn't use the standard allowance. So you couldn't use it for street work. You could use it for water and sewer if it met some climate issues. You could use it for broadband if you could show that the broadband capacity and use or costs were detrimental to the certain census tracts of the population and they had certain levels of income. So you can see how the standard allowance is a lot easier to use. We are excited to report that the transient room revenues have returned to levels similar or better than even before the pandemic, and that's even with the loss of the rooms at the Village Green. Revenues for rentals at the community center and armory will be increasing as the buildings have opened back up. The armory has been taking off with rentals. Last weekend, we had the Kennedy High School prom, and this weekend, this Friday, we have the Kennedy School prom in there. So it's really taking off and people are using it. We even had the Miss Lane County pageant in the armory. So they came down for the Miss Lane County and held it here. The community center rentals should be increasing even more when senior and disability services moves into their remodeled space and starts paying rent for that space, and the reception hall then becomes available for rent again as well. Personnel, we have included a new personnel services summary that I mentioned there on page 35 that is meant to meet the guidelines from the Government Finance Officers Association and is easier to see changes in personnel. They're actually bigger numbers too, because it's not as small as it used to be. When you're getting older, it's hard to read those numbers. Personnel numbers have remained the same basically overall. This proposed budget adds a police officer, and in the current budget, we had 4 additional dispatcher positions to handle taking over Central Lane Dispatch if we needed to. This proposed budget removes 3 of those positions that were not filled, but were in place in case we needed to. We were able to contract with the fire district for dispatch services. The district again contracted with Central Lane, so we removed those 3 positions from this proposed budget, and will continue to pursue the opportunity to improve 911 service to our community by returning the 911 service for fire and emergency medical calls to this Cottage Grove Public Safety Answering Point. Returning all calls to the Cottage Grove Center would have a dramatic impact on reducing response times and improving safety to the members of the community. The other significant change has been in engineering and public works. Our city engineer is retired and is working part-time on completing a few projects. Filling the positions with engineering has proven very difficult, and rather than continuing to have an understaffed division, we have contracted with private engineering firms to perform the needed tasks. Our remaining engineering staff, the civil engineer, has taken a job with Lane County. And we have reorganized in engineering to have an engineering project coordinator position to coordinate the contracts within Public Works. And within Public Works, we've made some other adjustments to positions, shifting functions and positions and responsibilities, but really no new staff. The 2022-23 proposed budget has a new personnel services expense in line item for the Oregon Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Program, PFMLI. Fun to say. The 2019 legislature passed House Bill 2005, creating the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program that requires all employers with 25 or more employees to participate in funding the program to provide paid family and medical leave. Employers must contribute up to 1%, that's what it currently is, and then they'll adjust that to how it needs to fund the program. 40% of that is paid by employers, 60% by deductions from the employees to the program, and it will begin in January of 23. The contributions will then fund up to 12 weeks of 12 weeks and up to 100% of family paid family and medical leave, and it's limited to $1,300 a week beginning in September of 23. This is in addition to wages that are already increasing as a result of inflation. And additionally, we've had to increase wages for minimum wage employees, as well as adjust the salary schedule by removing the lowest range from our schedule, since it would be lower than the next minimum wage increase. We are currently in negotiation with 2 bargaining units, and the budget may need to be adjusted to reflect the completion of those negotiations. Utilities, water, wastewater, and storm drains are being hit exceptionally hard by the current economy. We are continuing to follow the 5-year financial plan, but the plan of no increase in water and storm drain rates will be not sustainable beyond the 22-23 budget unless there are some drastic changes in the economy. And every year we always say, yeah, we're following the 5-year financial plan as long as other things don't change drastically. This year it has changed drastically, but we're still trying to follow that 5-year plan. Increased costs have eaten away the carryover, creating low transfers to the reserves. In the case of the storm drainage fund, the transfer to reserve is 0 and dangerously low contingencies. The 5-year plan does include a 12% wastewater rate increase. The costs for fuel, energy, chemicals, and even delivery charges have had a major impact. When we look at the wastewater, you'll see the chemicals in wastewater have doubled, and they've doubled this year, and that's not in this year's budget. And they've also added delivery charges for fuel delivery charges. And in the year, they've increased 25% just in the year they've added them. We have asked FCS Group, the consultants that help us and draft the model and the plan and everything, put that together to review the plan and look at the models and everything and see what current economic conditions are and how to provide information on directions to take before the 2023-24 budget year. The current 5-year financial plan was used to prepare the rates for this proposed budget. The table below compares the current rates with the proposed rates to begin July 1, 2022. The current rates are the only ones that change are in wastewater, and that changes wastewater amounts. The total amount, the proposed rates would increase at $7.23 for residential users using 5,000 gallons of water with a typically sized meter. A 5.9% increase for the total utility bill. The total increase will vary based on meter size consumption and type of use. No other fee or rate increases are proposed in this budget. During the year, the City Council may review and adjust fees or charges, but this budget is not prepared relying on any increased revenues or other fees. There is nothing secret about this budget, and we want to make sure that this $46 million budget is easy to understand as possible, and that's why some of the modifications have been made, and hopefully it helped make it a little easier and friendly to the eyes. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask me or the finance director, and we will get you answers. Please also feel free to ask any questions or express concerns at the budget meeting. Thank you for the council and the members of the budget committee for taking your time to participate in this budget process. We know, as we ask a lot of you to review this budget, which has taken us a couple of months to create, and I look forward to discussing it and answering any questions regarding the documents.
Thank you, City Manager Richard Myers. Are there any questions on the budget message before we move on? Anybody have a question? All right. Next up is public hearing. Public input on possible uses of state revenue sharing monies. Public hearing is open.
And would you hand in one of the lists there? Because we have a sign-in list of people that have signed it. We could just tell you that it's Amy for both of them.
Okay, so we have 2 here. Amy Merriday. You step forward to the podium and give us your testimony, please. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, I'm Amy Merriday, and I live at 205 Adams Avenue, and I feel very fortunate that I got a chance to look at the budget because Dana had a 10-mile hike with the Boy Scouts this weekend. And so I was really happy on page 2 that there was $200,000 transferred to the wastewater reserve. And that was going to be used for effluent pipe installation. Now, I've spoken about the effluent pipe here before because I believe the Purple Line is a huge resource that we need to share with the community. But I really need to talk about roads because some people think that roads is the only thing the government is about. And so, you know, the roads go without saying. And the the roads are under special revenue. I guess there's a street budget. There's a backlog of pavement conditions, what some people would call deferred maintenance, of $28.9 million in the town. So people really would like the roads to be okay. And so the street budget is for $4.5 million. And $4.5 million, when I look at this budget, is kind of a very important number because for a $46 million budget, when you hit something that's 10%, that's when I start to pay attention. Okay, so for instance, police services, $3.66 million for the proposed budget. Well, if this council doesn't get a shelter in place on 99, we might be needing to add an entire additional police officer and money for parks. And so budget, I'm not seeing that in the budget, but I think it should have to reflect inaction on the part of this council. Yes, the roads, capital improvements, another special revenue, $5.1 million. Yeah, the roads go without saying, but what I don't really care about the roads. I care about water, and that's why I usually talk about the Purple Line, because the water improvement map, this is all total enterprise funds now. Water improvement map, non-funded needs are $25.6 million. Stormwater sewer improvements that are not funded are $17 million, and sanitary sewer improvements not funded is $12 million. So I would put all that into water, and when you compare that water needs of $54.9 million with a backlog of $28.9 million for roads, I feel that maybe more of our money could go into water, and so I'm interested in water use. And it seems very clear that the citizens in this town are going to need to pay more for water. And in order to ensure their good faith, I am suggesting that the Purple Line be utilized as a commons, an attempt at commons, a resource that can be used communally. So why does the effluent water only go to the cities or the parks and the Middlefield Oaks and the Freeway Exchange when the people in our town who are paying for the treatment, paying a large amount of money with their water and their waste, you're up over the $5 million again, which is the cutoff for things that are important. I'd like to see key card access to the bathrooms. We could build gray water bathroom stations that we had as residents access to, businesses could have it. The sad thing at the cleanup downtown this weekend, lovely people on very fancy bicycles, all their equipment and stuff, going up to the restroom and it's not open. And we even had a work party in the park and the restroom wasn't open. It's very sad. We could have women, who have their children at the park. They could get the key card, and we can monitor access. I don't see that in the budget, but thank you for your time.
Mrs. Merriday, I have you down for 2 action items. Was that both of those?
Well,
I have you for 7A and 7B.
Miss Mindy helped me with doing it online, and I hit B, but I think B is for written testimony, and I don't have it in writing. So it's just
what do we do from this point, Richard?
Typically, you set some rules of what you want to do and how you want to progress. You can recess for the next meeting now if you wanted, or do we move forward and do some work and walk through the budget for a while and set a time limit on how far we want to go tonight? So those are your options as you look at that.
All right, shall we start the beginning of the reading of the budget? Yes, Mr. Council
Chair, I
Clark?
move that we end our meeting by 9 p.m. I move that we end our meeting by 9 p.m.
Okay.
Second.
Before you vote on that motion, let's close the public hearing.
Okay.
Then you can do that,
right.
yes.
So it looks like we're going to read the budget. Is that what we're going to?
We'll go step by step through the budget and everything, but we need to close the public hearing first before we.
I'm hard of hearing.
Close the hearing. Close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing. I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing. I got to get my hearing aids. So let's start
Okay.
the reading of the.
Can we call the question?
Yeah.
Okay, I suggest we meet by 9 o'clock. That's what we normally done. Yes, Councilor.
Vote.
That was a motion. Need to call the question.
Okay. Do I have a second? All right, all say aye. Aye, we will go till 9 o'clock.
Great.
Start.
So as we said, there's a lot of new information in the budget. We can go through the first few sections and pages, and there's some great information about Cottage Grove. So if you don't know where you live, here's some information to get you back familiar with the city. Some interesting information on the highest taxpayers in the community and what our assets are. The budget process and calendars there, so if you don't know what we're doing right now, you can see where we're at on that map. Moving on, I think my favorite piece is, you got the fund descriptions, but my favorite piece is this one. So not many of the budgets around the state have this page in them. If you want to see the entire city budget at one glance, this is the page to look at. All $46,258,251 are accounted for on this page with all the different funds. And so it's a really neat page to look at if you kind of want to get a real quick glance of what's going on. We'll start with the general fund. We did have the organization charts in here too, and they're there for your information and some information about revenues. But we'll jump right into the general fund. As I said in the budget message, the general fund is doing relatively well. Room tax money, the transient room tax, has bounced back, and we anticipate that we will actually have the highest year of revenue in room tax by the end of this June. We're almost there, where we've exceeded our previous high, which was the year right before the pandemic, and so we're just about there. That's pretty amazing, and that's with the Village Green gone for the year, and so things have bounced back really well. It may also mean that the rooms that are being used are charged a little bit more because there are less of them. And as we approach the World 2022 Championships coming to Eugene, everything is full. And we've heard some rooms are going for upwards of $500 or $400 a night. So we should see room tax from the county as well as from the city probably really reflect some of that as those numbers are there. Revenues in the general fund, I do want to point out, and this is one for South Lane Wheels. We have a significant amount of money coming in the federal grants and state grants that are South Lane Wheels. Later in the budget in the Community Development Fund, there's about $460,000 of expenditures. They're all accounted for revenue here, in addition to the MOD transportation. The other grants are federal and state. The MOD one comes from LTD, so that's why it's separated out from those. Any questions on general fund? General fund, we've taken all of the ARP of funds have come into here and will transfer out of the general fund to the appropriate places of where they're going. And so you'll see a huge transfer in the later in the general fund, a number of transfers that go out to those other funds, and ARPA funds are included in those. You'll see that revenue here, that actually there as well is the 1,162,220. That's the second tranche. The current amount is included in the $2 million carryover in the general fund. That is and that's the 600 and some thousand that's carrying over. I can't remember the number, but it's in the budget message, and we'll flip back to it real quick. The carryover amount is 682,135, and that's included in that 2,972 carryover there. Any questions on there are no new items in the general fund revenue. Things are starting to pick back up as a result of getting out of the pandemic. The loan proceeds are there. Those include the remaining amount for the roof for the community center and for the police cars. So the two police cars in there as well, a loan for those. City Council, any questions on the revenue? We'll move to the City Council budget. It's up a little bit, and one of the reasons it is up, we've increased the telephone and mobile devices. The city is moving away from the legacy phone system that has been here for 20 some years almost. I think it's somewhere around there. We can't remember when.
2005.
There's only a few of us that were here when this phone system came in. And the new phone system is going to be a fully digital on the cloud phone system, and we have the potential of having actual phone numbers on the cloud for city council members. So they will have a designated phone number that they can then use an app and use their own personal phone or use their iPad and access their phone messages that way. And it will also transcribe them, any messages they get and stuff that way. So they will that will improve that communication ability, that they'll have a designated phone number for council members. And do that. Other than that, it's basically staying the same. There's a slight increase in the professional dues. We've had some increases from some of the other agencies. I think LRAPA went up slightly. And then our education and travel and subsistence have remained the same, but you'll notice in 2021, they were really low because everything was canceled. And so we've kept them the same because those are opening back up, and in fact, I think registrations for NLC just opened, or is opening this week. Any questions on City Council? City Manager Department, same thing. We've got the contractual services for legal services. We have the mobile phones and devices and the telephone system. It's going to be a little more expensive to get started and get up and running, so that's in there. What was the other changes there?
Double the Yak scholarship.
Yeah, the Yak scholarship, we actually have, $5,000 that was donated into the Yak scholarship program in memory of Pat Patterson when he passed away, and we've used a little bit of it, but we have two students that in this year will probably be two juniors right now that'll be seniors next year, and so we'd like to try to do two scholarships, and so we put both of those in there. That some of that will come out of that scholarship fund in the trust fund. Anything, City Manager? Finance. This is our finance department and the services there. Again, the phone stuff, audit expense, you'll notice that throughout the budget is up because we have a significant amount of federal money coming in. Some of that is federal money as a result of South Lane Wheels. It's also the EDA grant and ARPA funds, and so we have to do a single audit to satisfy the federal requirements. The auditors are very happy about that because they get to charge more for a single audit, and as well as the fact that the budget has grown and their expenses have gone up. So that's a significant increase. This is only a portion of it, and so you'll see the $32,000 here, but you'll see that in other budgets as we move through. It's also increased there. We are back fully staffed as of today in finance, finally, and had some rough time. We've had a challenge in this last year in getting qualified employees. The police department, at the end of this month, will be down another 2 again. And police officers, as we lose officers as they go to other agencies. And we continue to try to bring new ones in. Yes. And you'll notice also computer software support. It's a new item, a line item in the budget for the funds for the different departments. It used to be included, some of it was included in contractual services. Say, for example, in the library, when we get to the library, the card catalog system, which we use, is actually Springfield's, and they have the license and run the card catalog for all the libraries in Lane County. And we then pay into that, and that's software support, and that was in contractual services. To help take care of some of that and differentiate those a little better, we've moved that into a new line item for software, computer software and support. It also includes a number of some of our features that we have and some of our packages that we have for cybersecurity. We won't go into some of those. We try to keep that secret, some of the things we're doing, but we do have some pretty significant cybersecurity steps that we've taken. And they have an annual and monthly cost associated with them as well. And so we've spread that out through the departments to take care of that software support. So we did that to kind of help differentiate those a little more from the hardware and from the contractual services. Other expenses, everything basically other than those seem relatively the same. Anything else for finance? Councilor Irving.
On the travel and assistance expense, I think this, we covered this last year, that 15,000 increase, was that for that? Or for getting travel expenses?
Oh, no, the YAC expenses for going to, and that would be in, I think we actually put that in city council. We hooked that into the city council in the previous year, and so because we kept that the same, we could assume that it's still there.
Will you remind me on the city manager's fund, fourth from the bottom, on page 46, 15,000, if that's for?
Because we have a new city recorder and we have a new assistant to the city manager, and so they're going to be going to a lot more trainings. So that's why that's there. We kind of put it up there last year, but we didn't use it because we didn't have all of the positions and they weren't offering the trainings yet.
Richard, wasn't that also increased to give the opportunity for the council to attend conferences out of state?
Yeah, and that's in the city council one. Yeah, yeah.
And to follow up on that, is there a limited number of trainings for the council are conceived of in the budget, or if there's additional trainings that we desire should be allocated more?
If we find things that are additional training that we'd like to do or the council would like to look at, then there is some flex in there for the numbers of going to National League of Cities, LOC conferences, and LOC has started the spring conferences too. And so we've tried to put all that in, but if we run into challenges later in the year, we'll fix that out of contingency in the general fund. Yeah. So I think we budgeted for everybody to go, and that's kind of the max is we budget for everyone to go to the National League. Not everyone goes, and so that opens up funds for other trainings and conferences. Moving on to community services. This is the fund that we run our community center out of. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a quick question as well. I see there's a clothing expense that is branded for $500. I'm just curious what that, this is in the finance.
Yeah, what did we put in?
So in the past, my staff has had
Yeah.
shirts, etc. It's been a personal purchase, and we're just including that. It's kind of like a promotional clothing, not so much to outfit them, but we had an H2O program that we wanted to promote, so we individually purchased the shirts and did that through our office. So that's what it's for. Something simple. It won't be spent just to spend it, but we'd like to have something there to be able to do some promotional stuff there. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll see clothing in other areas, and some of those are in the bargaining agreement for police and public works for their safety equipment and clothing that way too. Anything else in finance? Community services, and this is the location where we pay for the community center and take care of the services out of that building. We also have contractual services associated with ARPA here. This is for the operation of the warming through the homeless facility, the shelter. And so that's in this section, so if we need to make a change. We have a contractual services with South Valley Athletics, that's the SVA. They are now in the community center, and as a part of that process of bringing them into the community center, we're entering into a contract with them. They will have some positions on their board for city council members, so that we can start moving them into creating a better recreation facility or operations for the community, doing more intergenerational opportunities for youth and seniors to participate, and also coordinating their activities with the library. They will be taking over the summer camp program that the library used to run. So SVA will be doing that, and that's what this $15,000 is for, to have them do that for us and to expand that and provide other services. So keep an eye out for opportunities to participate with them. I mean, there'll be more than just soccer, baseball, and basketball. It'll have senior and youth ping pong or pickleball or stuff like that, where we hope to have more fun activities and programs that way.
That's a wonderful idea.
And so they'll also be doing the summer programs and taking the trips and doing the things around the community. So anything else there? Councilor Urban.
Oh, yes, Councilor, I'm sorry.
So can you give us a reminder, or me a reminder, maybe everyone else knows, if you want to make transfers within the fund, in the general fund, and you won't maybe want to do it down the road, not necessarily here, what are the limitations? What process within the general fund? Say you wanted to move something from the community services fund to the city manager's fund.
So if it's a line item that already exists, then you generally don't have to do a supplemental budget. You can do that by resolution throughout the year. We can move contingency funds, or we can move items around. There is a limit on the amount of contingency that can move at a time, and I think it's 10%, or is it 15? I get those confused, but it's 10. And so, but other items, if you wanted to move from one line item to another line item in the budget, you can do that within the fund. If you're, let's say, in community services and you want to move money from postage into mobile devices, you don't have to, because we balance these funds or these departments by the total of materials and services and personal services. So as long as those totals are what the budget is, that's what is appropriated. So you don't have to move them around inside those categories.
So you could just designate a change within personal services or material services by resolution, no amount limited within that same fund.
Some of it you wouldn't even have to designate, because if it's in the same category, you just say, yeah, we're not spending postage, we're going to spend it on electricity instead, and you don't have to move anything. So it balances out by the end.
Can that be done by the city, or does it have to be done by council?
We just do it as staff. We don't have to make any change here.
So the budget committee and then the city council adopts a resolution making the appropriations. In certain funds, it's by department, so bottom line of the department. In other funds, it's by category. So in enterprise funds, it's going to be personal services, materials and services, and capital outlay. And that is what is your limit for your expenditures. Whether it was spent exactly like it was budgeted, the state doesn't care, as long as you haven't overspent your appropriated amount. Does that clear that up? And
so that was for enterprise funds, business.
Yeah, and the general funds you don't have to do by the category; it's by the total for that department.
And the departments are things like community services.
Yes, exactly.
Correct. And in a contingency line item, it's 15% of the. 15% of the budgeted amount of the fund that you can transfer at one time out of the contingency somewhere else. So in I don't know how many $1 million are in the
$14 million in the
$14 million,
general
it would be 15% of that amount. So our contingency is well under that.
You said that's at one time, or one fiscal year?
at one time. So you're gonna transfer $100,000 into an existing line item. If it's not an existing line item, it has to go through a supplemental budget process and the city council has to adopt that.
And we'll point out there's some line items in the budget that are there strictly to be there in case we need to move money there. So we put a little bit of money in that so that that line item's there in case we need to move something to it. So we do create some of those in the budget if we need to move that way. And you'll see that especially back in the reserve funds or the SDC funds
Building
and
inspection.
building inspection funds. Yeah.
Counselor Savage?
Thank you so much. Sarah Roberts. Natural gas, I'm assuming that's Northwest Natural Gas?
Yeah.
Didn't their rates just increase this year? Is this gonna accommodate the increase in their rates?
Yes, because our use in natural gas has gone down in the community center library, and also as a part of that with the new roof, it's actually we're adding extra insulation in the building too, so we should see some of those costs drop as well.
So we should even out even though
Yeah.
the rates are low.
Yeah. Community promotions. This is our budget where we take in the county rural tourism money, as well as where we pay the chamber for their 1 percentage point of the 4% of our room tax, the transient room tax. You'll see that it's up because we're anticipating that next year in the budget year, because that's when the 2022 World Championship is, and I think there's a couple other pretty significant events in Eugene that are filling up fast, all the hotels in the whole region. So we're expecting that room tax to be significantly higher than what it has been, and so we budget that here. This is where we also then put money to South Lane Wheels and Family Relief Nursery and other organizations throughout the community, and we actually have added in the Eugene Symphony here. This year we've decided that since we're coming out of the pandemic, we did really want to go and ask businesses and people and organizations to contribute for the symphony this year. We were just going to use ARPA funds to do that, and then next year we'll get back into raising the funds and doing the donations and everything. Using regular ARPA funds, if we hadn't done the standard allowance, that would have been an allowable use because the symphony was shut down during the pandemic and suffered financially as a result. So this would be a definite allowed use even if we didn't use the standard allowance. We have the other things that we've done in years past are still there because we have to wait 3 years for it to be zeros all the way across before they go off the chart.
Counselor Savage first.
Just a quick clarification, for rural tourism grant projects, do I need to declare a potential conflict since I'm going into a business that is potentially tourism related? I'm not projecting to apply for any grants, but I don't know the answer to that.
It probably would be best.
Okay, so I'm gonna make that declaration and I'll recuse myself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Richard, I had a question on the last line item. The family is support the 5,000 last year. Was that community garden?
Yes.
Did that happen?
They are still happening, so it's still going on. They ran into some challenges associated with developing the property.
Okay.
They'd actually put some of the garden on what had been wetland, I believe, and they had to go back and do some redelineation and adjustment to that. So
that project is still in works.
It's still going forward and ready to move, but they've got some extra steps they have to go through, taking a little more time.
Thank you for that update. Yes, Mr. Meredith.
I was wondering if we can advocate for the Working Class additional support since they're attempting to rehab their new headquarters.
Yeah, in 2021, the council put $15,000 as kind of a kickoff. I think we were one of the first donors for the project. So, yeah, I mean they're moving forward with that project, and you could.
Any other questions? Okay, move on.
This would be a time to.
It could be a time, yeah. I mean, as we move through, if there are questions or issues, you can do it then, now, or you can wait until we get all the way through. It's up to you, yeah.
I would like to move that we support the Working Class support with $10,000.
Do we have a second? What's that?
Sure, I'll second for the discussion, you bet.
Okay.
So,
We do discuss it.
whichever you prefer. So actually, I was going to clarify, are we going to bring that from, oh, I'm sorry, are we going to bring that from contingency then, I assume?
We could do it from contingency. You could pull it from one of the other items, however you want to do that. I mean, there are funds in the contingency to be able to do that in the general fund.
So we have a motion with the second for $10,000 for Looking Glass support. Is that what we have? All right, yes, question, Councilor Savage?
Another question of clarification. My son is heavily involved in Looking Glass. Do I need to declare a potential conflict of interest?
Sure, why not?
On the safe side, I will recuse
Better
myself
safe
from
than sorry.
conversation.
Better safe than sorry. So we
That's
have
the
one
joy
more.
of being in a small town. Yeah, we're all involved in stuff.
Any other questions on that? Yes, Councilor Urban.
I guess I would offer an amendment in trying to keep the balance of the fund the same. Guessing let me clarify something first, I guess. The contingency is a general fund contingency?
Yes.
Okay. That we reallocate some of the existing funds within this fund and just move that to the also a different line item. And I would suggest pulling from, let's say, half from federally qualified health clinic and half from community schools.
So I believe we had a motion with a second though, didn't we? Is that?
He's offering a friendly amendment, so if the motion maker and the second both agree, then that's it. Otherwise,
Thank you, Councilor.
Otherwise, he can make a motion to amend it, we vote on that, and then we would go back to vote on either the amended or the non-amended based on that vote.
Thank you, sir.
One half.
I am fine with that, I don't have a concern. Will that mess with the school district?
What were the things that was from?
5,000 from the pool and 5,000 from the federally qualified health clinic.
Yes, it will mess with the pool.
So I would like more information. I got the impression from the presentation we had at the pool that we had a rock star running it. It sounded like it was going to be solvent without much help. They were acting looking for more funding. So I would love to hear more on the status of the pool's funding, where it is now, because it's certainly in a different place. I think the last time we discussed that, the construction hadn't been complete during the pandemic.
Right, and that's why it's down from the 150. The 75 is to pay for the operations and to help with those operations. The fees do not pay the costs associated with running the pool for the community events and the community programs that go on in the pool. So that's what that 75 is for, and as a part of that, yeah.
So since we're talking about the pool, I need to declare that my wife is the finance director at South Lane School District and she oversees the management of the pool. So I'll recuse myself on this.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Solskjaer.
question on did I miss it? Did the city council already vote on the health clinic funds separately to approve that, or is this going to be just when they approve the budget, then that'll be approved? Because those funds weren't approved where they did.
No.
You guys already decided to do that?
No. So basically, the budget is just setting what we can spend. It doesn't mean that we will. And so all we're saying is this is a placeholder should the council approve it. I would assume that is coming back before us.
Yeah, we have it. If you approve this for these items here, because these aren't operational type things, this would be what the contributions would be. So we have put some of those expenditures in here because we haven't had a chance to go back to the council. So what I would hope is that the council and budget committee come to the conclusion and decide on what those are going to be. The council can make a decision later too when the budget's adopted and the final action and make those adjustments as well there. So that's what these numbers are in here for, is for you to decide how you want to use those.
So we had a friendly amendment. Do we want to adjust the friendly amendment?
I would adjust the amendment to reduce the budgeted amount for federally qualified health clinic to 90,000, 10,000 to Looking Glass.
So only board members are able to do point of order. Thank you. So, Mr. Meriday?
Yes, I would not want the money to come from the allocation for the health center.
So you could make a motion to amend or just let it go.
I guess if more information on that, the operating assumption here is that the budget was,
Thank you, yeah.
that the budget, that we have a certain amount in contingency for a reason, and it might be identified for purposes that are foreknown that we might come up against, and considering the council has not made any approvals for the spending of this ARPA funds or the allocation percentages, that seems like the lowest hanging fruit for funds that don't truly have a connection right now. If everything else is really accounted for and there's real impact currently for people expecting it, that would be the reasoning why I would target ones that within the fund to go on, but I'll put it to.
Does the money have to come from these allocations?
So the motion on the floor would assume that we're coming from contingency, I would assume. I'm seeing the city manager nod. So right now, the motion would be to move 10,000 from contingency to that line item. And we did have a second, yes.
And the contingency amount for the general fund is on page 100, and that's $473,000, $473,130, but it's right there on page 100. So that's the amount that's in.
Third from the bottom.
All right, we have an okay with it. We have a motion with a second to, what do we say? I'll say aye. Vote.
You have a couple questions, so.
Call roll.
All those in favor signify, or do you want roll?
Yes, I have, City Clerk has clarification, so has the friendly amendment been
Withdrawn.
withdrawn? Thank you.
So is it roll?
I'm sorry, Counselor.
No
stats.
Mindy will do it.
Okay, Counselor,
Nay.
Counselor Fleck,
Aye.
Counselor Roberts,
Aye.
Counselor Savage, I recuse.
Yeah.
Counselor Solsby, Mayor Gowing,
I recused.
Amanda Gilbert, Danny Solsby,
Nay.
Gary Manley,
Aye.
Gary Williams, Don Rust,
Nay.
Armando Garza,
Nay.
Dana Merriday. So we have 5 in favor, 6 nays. 2 recused.
It was shot down. Should we move on now?
Okay. The next department is the police operations. And this is the basic general police operations for the police department. There are additional funds and operations and communication services in the special revenue fund. So not all of the police department is accounted for in this department. The 2 new motor vehicles are there, 125,000. Police cars have gotten really expensive. And that's the way they are.
That includes upfitting.
That's putting everything in them, all the gizmos and special superhero toys and stuff like that. Everything goes in there for that. You'll notice there's also a mobile crisis center response in the materials and services, and that's ARPA funded there for $25,000. That's to get started with working with South Lane Mental Health and exploring and creating some kind of program for mobile crisis response. We've been studying and looking and visiting with people from Florence that have a local rural one, as well as some of the individuals out of Eugene and Springfield as well, trying to kind of model a cahoots type approach as well.
Have its own vehicle?
More than likely, there will be something, but we may use something that's been decommissioned from other uses to initially get started. Yeah. Or this would be a way to seed some money with 25,000 that we could seed to get other grant funds to do more if we need more expenditures. Anything else?
No.
Yes, Mr. Irvin.
On the, that's when we're talking about the 25,000 for the mobile crisis response, correct? Do we have a scope of work or anything related to the use of that money?
Not yet. We're still in the process of creating and looking at how we could explore and do that. So we're still in the kind of the initial phases. Yeah.
Do we expect to spend the 25,000 if it's approved by the council for the exploration process?
Some of it may be used for the exploration, but most of it's going to be to get that started. You know, the initial expenses. Most of the exploration is going to be included in staff expense or other staff from other agencies helping moving through. But or it could even be used for a match for grants as we go out and find out that there's more expense to it that we want to look for grants on.
Do we have a general idea of how long that 25,000 would operate service?
No, we don't.
Over a day, over a month?
We don't have a clue. It'll be. It's not going to be more. It's not going to be a day.
So we could use it all up before anything actually happens in the community, potentially.
To get everything and the tools and the equipment that they need, yeah, it might be a part of a significant amount of that to get set up. Yeah. But then we'd be using existing staff and personnel from the other agencies and ourselves possibly to do some of that as well. So yeah.
And similarly positions cities that have a mobile crisis response unit up in operation. Do we have an idea of?
No, there aren't any. There aren't any with cities.
You said this is not similar to the Cahoots model.
Florence's is out of their fire district, and so it's a little different, and it depends on how, there's so many differences associated with whether they're using volunteers, what the other mental health facility is doing. There's a gamut of a spectrum. We have no idea, but this is to get that exploration going. Yeah.
Councilor, the Eugene model, the Cahoots model, is based out of the police department. The police department funds that and supports that through their fund. The Florence crisis response is what started as just a shell of a idea through the fire department because an employee was working there and helped spearhead that. The agencies that we're working with include Southland and Plain County Public Health, private contractors, to try to create something that would be beneficial to Cottage Grove and start out on a very limited basis that would be sustainable rather than trying to shoot for the moon and have Cahoots and all of the things that Eugene has and not be sustainable after a short period of time. South Animal Health has a difficult time with getting clinicians right now, people that might be able to staff that. The $25,000, I believe, is meant to show support for the program, which will show support as these different groups would apply for grants to support the entire process. We would be members of a group to do mobile crisis. We would not be the sole provider of funding nor staffing for them, but we would support that process. And from the police department standpoint, the ability, and even fire, the ability to have people that are trained to deal with mental health crisis, be able to take over a scene once it's stabilized, will save the city money in labor costs just for police officers alone, not to mention the benefit to the community and to the folks that are in crisis.
Thank you. The thought process behind it is we have a designation using ARPA funding, which is gone here today, gone tomorrow, and trying to get an idea of thought process behind, if it is in place, future years, what might we expect? If we get it launched, should have an idea of how much we expect to save potentially, and how much value it's adding, and see if it makes sense for an investment right now. I think we're here to decide on where money gets allocated. So any other information on that, if there is a plan, if there's already a plan hatched about what this might be.
Councilor Fleck, you'd like to add?
So yeah, there is actually an RFP right now at the county to look at, Be Your Best has been working with a whole bunch of stakeholders. I'm trying to remember, I think it's United Way is offering some money to explore what this would be. I mean, I don't know that this is set in stone, but I think there's a plan and there's an RFP, which just as a reminder, the RFP doesn't mean that's what's going to be. So if the vendors come back and say, gosh, we can't do that, that may get modified. And so they're in that process right now. And I just, for disclosure, want to say I'm on that RFP committee to evaluate those. So, but I have some concerns because I think right now that RFP is awful broad. And I don't know that we can sustain it, so I'm actually hoping to make sure that it's focused to be sustainable. So, like I said, I'm certainly happy to report more as it becomes available. But at this point, I think there is a plan. I'm certainly thrilled that the city's, stepping in because I do think ultimately this will benefit the community and save the department some money and future partners. I'm sorry, Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
We can't come up with a number. I know you're a number guy to know exactly what that $25,000 is going to get us. I will tell you that I believe that we start and continue that process with the RFP. I agree with the counselor but the RFP seems brought to us. And if your concern is about being sustainable after ARPA funds are used for these $25,000, I would tell you that our commitment, the police department's commitment, the city's commitment is to make sure that as we go forward, that is sustainable on whatever level that is. Cahoots, and I believe the West Lane Fire programs are 24/7. Maybe our program wouldn't start out as a 24/7 program. Maybe limited hours, limited days, whatever we would come up with. That would be sustainable. That would be supported by a number of agencies. But at this point, not having done anything like this in Cottage Grove, I can tell you that I don't have numbers in my head, but I know that we spend a lot of time as the police department dealing with mental health crisis that can be dealt by somebody who is better trained and is not removed from being able to do law enforcement type activities.
Yes, Tom.
Chief, I was just wondering, who would this group that is using the city vehicle going to answer to you for the fire department?
I think it would be probably a board. Yes, we would be a part of it. Okay. And I'll tell you that the city's contribution, and Richard is correct, the city's contribution is saying this is an important project for our community to help not only save resources that can be used elsewhere from the police department and fire department, but also to address mental health crisis. We want to support the program. We will benefit from the program. We will still respond to most crises until they're stabilized to make sure that it's safe for whoever is safe only for us to be able to use. We will be partners.
Thank you.
Is that fair, Councilor?
I think that's fair. And I don't know that it would be our vehicle, actually. I think there was a grant opportunity that was going to provide a vehicle as well.
I think that's what Be Your Best is applying a vehicle.
Chief,
well, hold on.
could we have Conrad or somebody check the lobby? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Soulsby?
Thank you, Councilor Roberts. I have a question for the chief. I heard a couple of the officers talking about body cams on the radio the other day. Is this in any of your equipment?
It is not. No. I attended a chief's conference in April And there have been some folks from the community that have expressed interest in supporting a body worn camera program in the city. And so I've reached out to providers of those cameras to start a process. I'm telling the folks that we're dealing with folks with.
He's in Berkeley, so I was like, I said, you're looking at the wrong place.
So I'm starting that process now, and with expectations that not this coming fiscal year, but the next fiscal year, we'll be prepared to offer something as part of the budget for the police department.
Chief Shepherd, I've heard the price of body camera storage has gone down. Is that true? That
I've heard that from some providers, and I believe that others have a premium on their services. We have had 2 presentations so far. We have 2 more to go through. And we've heard everything from $50,000 startup to $234,000 startup. With a lot of, some of the providers, really the cost is the proprietary stuff that they have with their system and the storage. Cloud storage has become simpler. At least that's what they're telling me. So we're hoping that we'll be able to take advantage and find a happy medium that will help our department and help the community feel confident, but also operate the best.
Do you have any other questions on that topic, Councilor Schulte? Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right. Richard, back to you.
Anything else on police? Municipal court. This is our general municipal court operations. There are 3 court departments. You have your municipal court, and then you have your court support services. Those are the defense attorneys and their expenses, the court-appointed attorneys. We did this separation a number of years ago. The judge felt that it was not good for his fund, his department, to have the court-appointed attorneys in his department, since they're supposed to be kind of separate from the judge. And then we have peer court. Basically, the operations continuing in municipal court. They've had some changes. You'll notice the truancy line item is 0. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, saw that some communities were using the municipal court for helping the schools with truancy, and they passed a law that says you can't. So that got rid of that opportunity. And we continue to have those kind of things happen to our courts. You'll notice that's in the Did You Know box there on the page. Any questions on municipal courts? The support services, you'll see that the defense attorneys went up a little bit. It's a small increase compared to the number of hours they're actually starting to put in. One of the things that has been helpful with the defense attorneys is the opportunity to virtually do stuff, and they've been doing a little bit more of that, and that's helped keep the costs down a little bit on the court-appointed attorneys in defense. Our interpreter fees has also increased because of the need for more interpreter services, and mom interpretation is expensive to get. There aren't many around, and we've had to actually go to Portland to get people to come down to the court. So you'll see an increase there.
Councilor Urban has a question.
Yeah, where do the collected fees through the court show?
They go in the general fund. So they're in the general fund revenues. And so back on page 39, are they on 39 or on the other? You'll see them towards the bottom of the page in this little box on the bottom of the page 39, traffic fines, parking fines, court costs, court-appointed attorney fees, crimes, truancy, and then restitution and surcharges and stuff are right there for court. And then we have some more on the court credit card and court administration fees on there as well.
You said page 39?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Total revenue.
Yeah, on the revenue.
The bottom.
On the bottom section of the page 39 is all court.
Not expenses.
Anything else, Councilor?
Yeah, those are based off the expected percentage of
Yeah,
collections
yeah.
in that year?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Richard, can you
And then youth peer court, we are struggling with youth peer court. We're the only peer court that's left in Lane County. We were the first, and then we're the last one. The Department of Youth Services is taking the opportunity to take all of the youth cases and not give anything back to peer court to do. So we don't have the opportunity to hold youth accountable. We've kind of gone rogue a little. And we've taken some off the top and done them ourselves and waited for them to say, hey, we aren't getting everything. So we're continuing to try to work and get peer court back to where it can be functioning. We have a couple of judges now as well, and they've actually started getting back into doing things for peer court. It shut down during the pandemic as well as because of what DYS is doing. So we have no intention of getting rid of it, but we're going to continue to fight to try to get more opportunity to use it.
Mr. Schultz.
Richard, why, did you excuse me, happen to know why you were the last one, why we're the only one doing it still?
Because of DYS and pulling them, I think, and you can explain a little more why that's going on.
You weren't paying attention to me? No, I wasn't. No, it's okay, I just know. On the peer courts, why we're the last one? You know what's going on with the other ones that dropped out? Is there something?
I think the main thing is that Lane County was just taking all the cases and utilizing their services and not passing it back down to peer court, the cases that they didn't need to keep. We had, last January, last December, Kathy Kelty and I met with Lane County. And at that time, they talked about coming with a new system to triage cases and proposed that, or pledged that they would come up with this new system and then let us know, and then there would be more likelihood that they would kick cases back to peer court so that we could handle our kids in our community. And they never came up with that new system. We were tired of waiting. We started running people through the peer court, and it just so happened that one of the families had a older pamphlet or something, and they called Lane County. So Lane County was alerted that our peer court was running amok down here, and so that's when they called us and said, hey, we need that. And we were looking at what the requirements are from ORS, and my intention is to contact Lane County again and say, yes, we understand that there are some rules that maybe we haven't followed to the letter. You have not come up with a system to tell us that you're going to send kids back so they can be accountable in our community. I think peer court is a wonderful tool, and the premise is that kids have to do something to make up for their bad deeds. Doing it in our community, I think, is totally appropriate. What has been happening is that a kid would write graffiti on a wall or something. Their parents would get a letter and there would be nothing else. There would be no consequence to their actions, which I believe doesn't teach kids anything. Kathy Kelty does a great job of holding kids accountable. Maybe it's some community service. Maybe it's just an essay that says, hey, I won't ride on thousand walls again. But it's still something that benefits our kids and the community.
I mean, to answer your question about why we're still hanging on, I suspect that we decided not to just go away. And we decided collectively, between Kathy Kelty, the chief, and I, the city manager, that who was important enough to hang on to. So we just refused to relinquish complete control, and that's part of why we're still around.
Yeah, that answers my question, because that was the second part is it effective? So it sounds like it is. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salisbury. So you're saying that this program benefits the community, you feel it?
Obviously, very evident to us.
We've had parents thank us for it, so yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Richard?
Moving on to maintenance, this is one of our public works departments, is the one that does most of the maintenance throughout the parks and throughout the city buildings, custodial services, those kind of operations. Here's one of the, we are adding a custodian with our buildings and services that we have. We just need an additional custodian. and the uses that are going on and the expansion of those. Let's see, what else is on there? One of the things we did want to mention in police, and you'll see it in maintenance as well, you can look at fuel and lubricants. Those are up everywhere. I don't know why, but they're up everywhere. Yes, we do know why. Those are a big cost that have increased throughout. The BLM maintenance, trail maintenance, if you look at the general fund revenue, there's only $10,000 plus some loose dollars there in money from BLM. This is $30,000 is because we still have funding in the current budget that we haven't used yet that will be carrying over as a part of the money we've received from BLM, and this will be expending that. So that's why that's.
Is that the money used to help clean the trail and keep
That's the money
things
to maintain the
maintenance
trail, yes.
and running up and good?
If I might, the actual revenue comes in on the revenue side of the general fund. These are expenses. This $30,000 expenses portion of the BLM grant that we got approval from is a portion, about $15,000 a year, is paid to Kennedy Alternative School for the work that they do on the trail. So this is the expense out. We were able to get the first year was for $59,000, and then BLM called us and asked us to apply for 2 additional years. So we applied for 2 additional years and received approximately an additional $120,000 over the original amount was. So we have resources to maintain the trail for the next 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Yes, Council Savage.
Thank you so much, Councilor Roberts. I see that fuel and lubricants went up, but then there's a new line item for natural gas. Is there something additionally that we are setting that aside for? Or is there equipment that we got that needs different gas? What's the difference between the two, I guess?
Back in the day, last year, in the years, natural gas was being charged to fuel and lubricants on that. And so we created this own line item like in other budgets to call it out so that we know what the exact or what the expense is going to be per year. And then the natural gas, the majority of this natural gas expenses for the armory use in the armory. So it's really just creating its own line item and pulling it out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Soulsby.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I've seen a common thread here with some of this computer software, Richard, with some of the other things. Is that, and there's some new items there. Is that, you guys got a new vendor for all the
It's for the computer software equipment and the cyber stuff. We're spreading it out on all the funds and departments. So the cost isn't in one place. It's spread out for the departments that are using it.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
So I just share just a little bit more context for Public Works. Public Works, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we purchased iWork software, and we use it, and it's expensed out to virtually every one of the Public Works funds. It's a program that benefits each of those areas. And in the past, it had been expensed out in the contractual services line item. So we wanted to call that out so that it didn't get lost in the contractual services line item. And then in future budgets, we know what our expenses are for software that we use.
Engineering, as we commented at the beginning, we've made some significant changes to our engineering department. It has just been terribly difficult to get engineering staff, even the engineering tech, on board. And so we've gone out, you'll see the contractual services are up, and that's to pay for the general fund portion of those contracted engineers. We have 2 firms, Branch that's doing streets and utilities, and then West Yost that's doing the treatment facilities generally, and they'll switch back and forth if they're needed to help share time and take care of that. The positions are, we have the city engineer that's still working part-time. He's supposedly going to finish up sometime in the fall on some of the projects. I think we're shooting for that.
And it's actually open to be done close to June, July,
Good.
And be available potentially just as a set of eyes to review the master plans as they become available for their creation.
And then we have the engineering project coordinator that would then be coordinating the work between the engineers and staff and the departments. and making those connections.
Richard, the company we hired, Eugene, are they in this line item?
They're in the contractual services, so it'd be the general fund portion of their services.
Okay.
A lot of their services will also be in the utilities and in the street.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on engineering? All right.
Broadband services, this is where we take care of the services for the fiber network that we have in Cottage Grove and Crestwell, operating the whole system. We also take our contractual services for our IT department. We contract with LCOG, and they provide 7 days a week, 5 days a week, our work days, coverage for us for IT, and help maintain the systems and everything for us. Yeah, that's what's there. Any questions on broadband?
Yes, Councilor Urban.
Yeah, are the new cybersecurity measures going to be managed also by
Yes, they're the ones that basically oversee those and monitor those and service those for us. As well as by contracting with LCOG, we're able to use 2 staff members that come here regularly, but then we also tap into some of the expertise from some of their network people that are in Eugene at LCOG. It's a great relationship because all of our fiber goes right to their basement as well, so they're able to help monitor and see what's going on that way as well.
Is that in any, all the city connections, is that on a closed network? So as I would assume that cybersecurity measures are going to take up additional bandwidth on the existing network and out. Is that tied in with the city Wi-Fi? Would that represent any degradation service to people who are paying for the Wi-Fi? Although I imagine that's pretty.
I don't think we have anyone paying for Wi-Fi anymore. Maybe a couple, and we used to have way more, but because of the installation of our fiber, then Spectrum was able to. They're basically leasing our fiber and running their stuff on our fiber to get here, and so that then opened a market, which is what we wanted it to do. And so most of those people have jumped over to Spectrum or other services that are available on the network that way. So we have just a few, but essentially all of our cybersecurity stuff is on our network side and doesn't get onto the Wi-Fi side. So it's a completely separate network. We actually have we have the police department as a separate network, completely separate from our system, to satisfy the criminal justice information system requirements, CJIS. And then we have our system for the general government stuff. And then we also have a system over at the water plant, a system at the sewer plant. And the community center, I believe, is tied into our system here. And so they manage all of those. The water and sewer plant are also managed. We have a computer company called TAG, which does specifically systems for operating plants, water and sewer plants. And our IT department works closely with them and with the plant operators in monitoring and making sure that TAG is doing everything they need to do on their end. In fact, we've just started having meetings with them where we're kind of doing tabletop exercises. What do we do if something happens? How do you shut down? How do you monitor and make sure we're secure and closed off from what could be coming into us on those operation sides on the plants? So they're involved in all of that, and we're continuing to get them more involved in the operation of our fiber system. Part of the contractual services are also paying for costs associated with EarthClick here in town that monitors our fiber system and basically operates that. But we will be weaning away from them and moving more towards LCOG doing that for us, as well as possibly some other provider.
Staying on the Wi-Fi track, are there plans to decommission what is up, or where will we find the cost of running it now? Are they spread across power and construction services?
Yeah, basically they're in the electricity costs. We try to pull those in here, but a lot of the electrical charges for the Wi-Fi come from the light poles as well. So they're just a fixed amount per radio, and so we pulled most of those that I believe or people are separating that out of the utility bill, but it doesn't always happen because they get attached to a light from the PFMLI and we don't realize that it's attached. They've attached it to the light instead of putting it as a separate charge.
Are you saying that residential houses get some allocation?
No, the street lights. So the street lights out on the street, our Wi-Fi radios are plugged in directly into their power source at the top of their light.
And that's really the only expense associated with
Yes. Yeah. And the Wi-Fi radios and stuff are beyond life. And so right now we're not looking at doing anything and expanding or improving those. What we really want to do is expand and improve the fiber network and the actual fiber system. And there's money in the general fund that's going into the general reserve fund, 200,000 out of ARPA to do that. And we're holding on to it until we see what happens with the EDA grant, because we have a portion of the EDA grant for broadband as well. So we want to put those together if we need to do something really good downtown with expanding the broadband fiber network.
We have a negative impact on just shutting those transmitters down.
Do what?
Be a negative impact to just shut those transmitters down.
Yes, because people are using them. We're seeing use on them. It's just not the greatest. I mean, the max is 7 megs, but that's if you're standing right underneath one that's directly tied into the fiber network, and nobody else is using it. Generally, you're getting 1.5 or 2 megs on each one of those radios, so they're not used a lot, but people are using them in the parks and with their mobile devices and stuff. So we'd see some people lose that connection. Yeah.
Any other questions? Richard?
Okay. Development, the next department in our public works, and this is the community development portion. We'll get through the 5 or 6 pages of narrative associated with everything that development does. This is where your planning and zoning is. Economic development stuff comes out of here, as well as the oversight of South Lane Wheels. And the grant expenditures are accounted for here as well. The Main Street grants, the RAIN is here as well, the entrepreneurial program that we have with RAIN Oregon, and they're funded out of this as well. We have a grant that we received from the Woodard Family Foundation, and that's accounted for in this and expended out of this to pay a portion of the RAIN expense.
This also has the downtown construct.
Yes.
Any other questions on development for Mr. Myers?
Item 76159 years grant expenses. Can you spell that, please?
This is 5311 money. This is for South Lane Wheels. So it's the 5311 are all the transportation grants and funding that we get for the South Lane Wheels. And so this is some CARES money from the federal government to South Lane Wheels, and it comes through us, and we handle that with them.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Is CARES money temporary as well?
It is temporary, but with the transportation, they continue to receive an additional amount for that. Yeah. As transit. They're continuing to get money from it. It will end eventually, but this is continuing that what they're getting here.
Pass-through.
It's all a pass-through here.
Is there other expected into that?
What was the
I
question?
think it's just when it gets used up.
Yeah. So
I think it just doesn't get replenished. There's just a lot of it in there, and they just keep bringing that out.
So that's a federal pot against this.
Yes, Mr. Soldier.
Richard, on the Main Street facade line item there, the last I heard, there was no one who applied for that 10,000. It has to be done before June. So does that get carried over, or is it just going to go away and you're just going to do another 10, or are you going to carry it over to make it 20 for next time?
Actually, I think there is an application that's being considered at a historic preservation committee right now. So I do think there's somebody that's got an application for this year's allocation. But generally what happens is that if it doesn't get spent this year, it goes back in the general fund, we just appropriate the 10,000.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes, Councilor Soulsby.
Councilor Roberts, the special projects preservation, can you explain what that is?
The 5,000 that's for the Preservation Commission, isn't it?
Yeah, that is for, it used to be for the Landmarks Commission, it's now for the, because we changed the name to the Preservation.
That's right, that's what
It's
I meant.
5,000 that they allocate for special little projects.
And can you explain nuisance abatement?
That's where we take care of nuisances? Yeah. So when we have to actually take care of mowing the grass or doing the work that needs to be done, we do it out of here, and we have to spend the money to do it, and then we put a lien on the property to get it back.
Okay. Yeah, no, I recognize. Thank you very much. Yeah. Any other questions?
Library. The library is operating 46 hours a week. So we're back to the full operation. They're seeing an increase and continuing to see increases in attendance and use of the library as it's come back. We did some significant remodeling and cleaning up and painting and everything in the building. If you haven't been in the library since before the pandemic, you need to come in. It's really nice. This is for the two part-time. We have 2 part-time librarians, and we have 2 full-time librarians and a head librarian now. In 2020, as part of the pandemic and bringing it back, we eliminated a department head here and made this a division essentially of the city manager's department. And so we eliminated a department head position, but have a head librarian now. Some great work going on there. Basically, let's see what else has increased there. I don't think there's
The grant.
the software and supplies. Computer software and supplies. This is what I mentioned before. You'll notice contractual services is down from 22,000 to 8, but this computer software and supplies went up because it's brand new, and that's where we're paying for the card catalog program with Springfield, and they also have another program that they've got for youth and kids that they use in the library for children. So,
Councilor Irvin.
I know there's a program or something that I would like to know what's going on that comes out of where there's, like you can check out tickets to the Raptor Center, and I believe there's the Natural History Museum at U of O. Where would that come out of? And I'd put it to us to maybe increase the number of things in our area, experiences that our residents could check out.
some of those they don't have to pay for, so they just contact and they get those donated to use. And some of them are actually paid for out of the Friends of the Library as well. But if they ended up paying for one, they're going to get it out of their non-print library materials. That's where they get their books and their books, that their recordings and stuff like that. But that's where they get those tickets and stuff if they use those as well. But a lot of them that we're actually getting through other sources.
Mr. Soulsby?
I'd love to see expansion. I would love to see expansion on that program. I don't know how to go about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and they'll continue. They're continuing to look for more opportunities to have those, and yeah. So if more people check them out and use them, they'll get more. Yeah.
Did you still have a question, Mr. Sutton?
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Is the grant expense, is that like just a outgoing of some coming in on the revenue side?
In,
Okay.
out.
It's not a matching?
No.
Okay.
There's an annual state library grant that they apply for, $1,200, and there's a number of these other small grants that just automatically they just turn in the paperwork and they get it, and so that's where all those come in.
He's got half of $20,000.
Oh yeah, and those are all part of.
It's a,
Oh, that's the library. That's the big American Library Association
Right.
one. Yeah.
right.
But they spend that on books and stuff?
Books. The American Library Association. They're actually buying. They're getting a grant for cubicles and some sound proofing or baffles in the library to help minimize the acoustics that are going on, and so that's what that $20,000 is.
Yes.
So I've noticed that we haven't contributed anything to the youth programs last year. There's nothing budgeted for the youth programs this year. Is that because there's the youth programs gone away, or is it because we're contracting with SBA?
No, some of it is SBA because they got rid of the summer program. And then the rest of the in-library stuff that they're doing is part of the children's librarian program. Yeah. But a lot of it is the summer camps that the SBA is doing. Yep.
That answers your question. Any other questions?
Where are the revenues? I'm not seeing.
Revenues are in the general fund. This is a general fund department, so that they're all in the general fund. If you look on page 40, I believe, I think it's on, yeah. So you got library fines there, but it uses just tax dollars to fund the library. You also have your library per capita. There's your per capita state grant for the library. Your library cards are actually up. They're having a lot more of the residents outside the city get library cards. They're seeing an increase in that, and the library cards there they are. They're almost at the bottom of the revenue page, the 54,200 library cards. We got that at $7,000. So they're seeing that come back after the pandemic. They're continuing to do their curbside, and people can get books that way as well now. They're continuing to do some of those programs. They're thinking they're going to continue to do the library in the park, since that was so.
Is that the mobile library?
Yeah, and doing more of that. The Friends of the Library have actually applied for a grant, I believe, for a vehicle for the library to do more mobile stuff as well, but we don't know where that's at yet. So.
Any other questions on this? Move forward.
Then we have our last department in the general fund. It used to be called the non-departmental department, but now, because the state did not like us saying a non-departmental department, we've changed it to the internal support department, which makes a little more sense, I guess. These are for those funds that spread across a lot of the departments in the general fund, and so it's just hard to separate those out. Our insurance is here, labor negotiations are here, our contractual services, and these include things associated with the vision keepers. What was the other one that we put in there this year? I'm drawing a blank on it. Safety committee expenses and safety awards and things here. And the transfers is where you'll see the ARPA money going out. We haven't noted which ones, the transfers to the water reserve or to the general reserve or to some of these may have ARPA funds in there as well as general fund monies in there, because we couldn't really separate out those transfers as well. But in the receiving reserve fund or fund, you'll see it's separated out. Here's the amount coming from the general reserve, and then what's coming in from ARPA is noted as ARPA on it. So we've separated them there in where they're receiving these transfers.
That's going to be my question. Thank you. Any other questions on internal support? Yes, Mr. Soldier.
I'm sorry, I got lots of questions. I'm the new guy. So on the general reserve funds, I see the big jump there. Is there something you're saving up for, or?
This is ARPA funds. ARPA funds have done the big jump.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you go to the general reserve fund back when we get to those, you'll see how that's broken out there in the revenue.
So within the reserve fund, then you can pull it out to cover other things, right? It comes up.
The reserve funds can only be used for what they're defined to be used for. Typically, it's buildings and vehicle purchases.
So it's already earmarked.
Yeah, it's all marked for those specific things. The only reserve fund that has operational costs in it is the building inspection fund. And that reserve fund for building inspection services was created so that we can pay for vehicles, or if the economy goes in the tank and building inspections drop, we can continue to maintain our building inspection program even though fees coming in from inspection services are not there. Because it's difficult to stop that program, shut everything down, and then try to restart it with new people. It's better just to keep the staff we have and keep that going while we're waiting for the economy to pick up. So we're actually putting extra money in there every year just to make sure we have funds to continue that program.
So you can use the contingency fund too for that?
You can use the contingency fund as well in the general fund, but or in those other funds too. But the only one that will allow you to use operations is the building inspection. The others are for specific capital improvements or design and development. And all the reserve funds are renewed every 10 years. So in 2028, the reserve funds will be renewed again, and we'll go through, and the resolution spells out exactly, here are the things that can be used for and what they can't be used for. Well, generally we just say what they can, because the list of what they can't would be too long.
And if it's not needed anymore by budget law, it goes back to the general fund unless it specifies something differently when it was established.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any insight into, it seems counterintuitive to me why the marijuana tax was down so much?
Yes. The state share of the revenue from the marijuana tax dropped by 75% because of ballot measure 11. Was it
110.
110. Yeah, and the state took and funded the program, the rehabilitation program, using the local share of marijuana tax that they collect.
Which no one's using.
No, we're still getting low state tax, but our local tax has picked up a little. It went up in the pandemic, and so did liquor tax.
I mean, it looks to me like it almost made up for it.
Almost, but not quite. I mean, but you got to think, if it made up for it, what would the estate tax would have done that we didn't get? Yeah. The cities put out a bill. The cities tried to push for a bill this last legislative session to the number one city in the state of Oregon for marijuana tax is Ontario, Oregon. They do more than Portland. Exactly. If you haven't driven through Ontario, the dispensaries in Ontario are pretty fancy. They have drive-up windows, and I mean, they are really high-class looking places. But Ontario pushed for, and all the other cities in the state joined in trying to get a bill to let us raise our local tax to 10% instead of the 3% we're capped at, to make up for the loss that the state revenue, the state is taking from the local share of the state tax. And that didn't get through the legislature, but it's going to go back in the next session again.
So for that.
Are we budgeting for that or not?
We're not budgeting for the addition, for the new law, because if it wouldn't go into effect by this budget anyway. Yeah. Because if it does pass in the next legislative session, it wouldn't go into effect until at least 30 days sine die from the legislature, but it's typically 60 to 90 days after the governor signs it. So it probably wouldn't go into effect until July of 2024. Yeah. Or January of 2024. Yeah. Because they probably use it. They like to use calendar year when everything else is fiscal, so it messes everything up in trying to account for stuff.
Anything else?
That was more information than you wanted, I think, probably, but yeah.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I'm just curious, if it got moved out of another item or something, I see you've got the, and I'm not against this, I'm just curious, Safety and Appreciation Awards, 0, then 5,800, so it's a new.
Yes, we've started that here in this budget year, because we've been kind of accounting for it in each individual fund tucked away, and we actually set a line item for it. So. And we revamped our whole safety awards program, and one of the reasons the zeros are there too is we didn't have it for a couple of years because we were really challenged on how we have such diverse employees that we have certain departments that are regularly getting hurt and they can't really help it because it's the people they're dealing with that hurt them. And then other departments that might turn a valve and twist their back, or then other departments that, yeah, they get a paper cut. Or, you know, I didn't say which department, but, you know, so we have a wide variety of experience mods with the employees. And so it's really a challenge to create a safety program that is equal for the risk associated with the different departments. And it took a couple of years, but we got our department heads together and we got some staff together and tried to iron out that so that when police officers receive a safety award, it means something to them, and it's not quite equal to what a library staff or finance staff get, because the risks are different. And so so that's where that's at, and we're kind of proud of the program. It seems to really work, and the employees have appreciated it. It made a lot more sense. In the past, we'd had employees leave grumbling that, well, how come, we're in the sewer ditch every day and doing this, and we got the same thing the library staff got. So, yeah.
Any more questions, gentlemen? Move forward.
Special revenue funds, these are our funds that are, the revenues are specifically restricted under either the state constitution, which is the street fund, or through other statutes or ordinances that we've created or the state has created. Our street fund is required under the state constitution that all gas tax money and street fund money comes into this and has to be used for street funds. And so it comes in, we have to use it within 2 years for street funds. Bicycle and footpath funds we can accumulate for up to 10 years, and we have those restrictions associated with it. So here's where we're bringing in the $2.5 million for the grant from the federal government for the EPA grant. The grant is actually $5 million, and we expect to get half of it in 1 year and then the half in the other fiscal year. So that's why we've accounted for half. This is where we account for our local gas tax as well as the state apportionment, the amount we get from the state gas tax, and then our urban aid money. And those are the ones that are strictly restricted on how and what they can be used for, and they have to go into the street fund. Our other revenues, we have money coming in from the storm drainage fund and from the general fund. This is, we didn't put ARP on that. Oh, it's on the expenditure. We have about $400,000 coming in from the general fund. This is ARP fund for street and transportation. So if you go to the actual capital budget for the street fund, you'll see that coming in as buildings and improvements ARPA, and that's on page 117, and $400,000 into there. We haven't quite decided which streets and projects that will be going towards, but we'll be working with our engineers as they look at what could be the best bang for some of the streets that need that maintenance and would make the best improvement with that funding, and or partnered with other funding that we have. The first portion of it is street maintenance. This is where we take care of our street lighting. We maintain the streets, potholes, painting the lines. All of those projects are handled here. So we have a small amount of asphalt and concrete patching and work that way. You'll see a considerable increase in fuel and lubricants again, as well as some of the materials that we use are going up significantly. Any questions on street maintenance?
Seems so.
Street sweeping, this is our sweeping. Oh, did we?
Yeah. Yes.
Just remember to
Councilor Irvin.
constituent, what, is it in the SDCs where you have the number of expected trips in and out? Does any of that, the usage of the roads correlate to funding from?
All revenue that goes into the street SDC, and it's based on those trip counts and everything, and that creates the SDC, the System Development Charge for Streets, go into the System Development Fund. They can only be used for projects under state law that are associated with our street plan, our master plan, that are on the CIP list, or they have to be streets that increase capacity. Certain widths are required there as well. So they cannot be used for general maintenance. They can only be used for increasing capacity or building new streets that are in the CIP or repairing in the CIP.
So I was thinking about the road start fire, that section of the road. Maybe misremembering, but I thought that they helped contribute since there was so much damage done to that. Is there a potential to ask, to?
So in that instance, you are correct. Starfire wanted some additional paving done.
Yeah.
We were confined to the travel lanes. The Starfire wanted some additional width where their trucks entered their facility, and so they made a contribution to pay for that additional amount of road that wasn't programmed to be part of the repaving project. So we are, when there are opportunities for businesses that want, when we're doing a project and they would like some additional work done, we try to accommodate it and provide
how would that come in? Would it come in through the general fund and then get distributed to?
It'd come into the street fund.
Street fund?
If it's a general paving project. If it meets the requirements for SDCs, then it would come in there. But yeah, the requirements for SDCs are dictated by state law, and if you violate those, you have to pay it back out of the general fund.
Okay. So if there was some businesses or school districts or something that wanted to help increase the condition of the roads, they could just kind of check to the street fund.
And I think the school district did pay some of the improvement costs associated with 4th Street when we did in front of their, but mainly because of their pull-through that they did.
They contributed a small amount. A lot of what happened with the school district is that they were able to add paving some of their bus fund facility into our contract and benefited from the prices that were locked in on our contract. So there was a scope increase on that project that we were able to use our contract to do it. There was some work at the new Harrison site that they contributed for sidewalks and some of the street repaving that was because of their new school project they did.
Any other questions?
Street sweeping, this covers the costs associated with street sweeping. We do regular street sweeping of all the streets. 75% of the costs here are paid for out of the storm drainage fund, because sweeping up the stuff off the street keeps it from getting in the storm drains and getting in the river and stuff that way. So those monies come in as revenue into, do we come in revenue here, or do we just pay for it out of it?
Pay for it out of it.
We just pay for it out. Oh, no, it comes in revenue from the storm drainage. So that's what the 40,000 is from the storm drain fund in revenue for the street fund is to pay for the street sweeping, their portion. If the storm drain fund was a little better condition, we would probably see more money coming from the storm drainage fund to pay for street sweeping. And then we'd be able to use less of the money for street sweeping in street and use it on maintenance or capital projects. But because storm drainage is in such bad shape, they're only contributing $40,000.
The street sweepings, I see this flow of this truck and the dumping. Where is that being funded?
Cool enough, we had the street sweepings tested. And because typically we've been hauling them in the past to the landfill, and they've been using it for cover coat, but they've then charged us a tonnage for hauling them up there, and then plus we had to haul them. We had them tested to make sure that we didn't have heavy metals in there or the chemicals, the fuel and stuff like that. They passed the test. They are safe to use, and so we're using them now as bedding material for pipes and stuff that we use when we're digging and other projects around the city. So we're reusing the sweepings in places. So we're not shipping them all the way to the landfill anymore. Another green thing that we're doing, sustainable. So.
Any other questions?
And we get a lot of sweepings. I mean, you can see that pile there. In the course of the year, we have a huge pile, and it'd take weeks for us to ship it all up to the landfill, but now we're able to use it. And it grows some interesting plants too if you let it sit there for a while. Street capital projects and improvements. This is where we fund the actual road improvement projects and beyond regular maintenance. You'll see the buildings and improvements there for the ARPA, the 400,000. We have the 2.9 million for building improvements. So that's the Main Street project. If we get the EDA grant, if we don't get it, then it's only 450 there, and the engineering services or anything there. So we're excited that we've got 3.4 million there to spend on street, hopefully this year, this coming year, and we're hoping that it's going to be a lot of Main Street work.
That would be wonderful.
Then we have another internal support department. And so this is things across all of the different departments in the street fund. We have our advertising audit expense. it went up a little bit here because there's a so small portion of that. We try to keep as much of that down for the street fund just because we're limited on how to use and what we can use it for. So we want to try to get it to those uses.
Audit expenses based on last year's expenditures. So I do a formula and allocate a percentage of the audit to how the money was spent.
And every year out of the street fund, you're supposed to transfer a percentage of it to the bicycle and footpath fund to handle sidewalk improvements and bike paths and stuff like that. And so here we have the 20,000 going out into the bicycle and footpath fund. You do have in the capital, you have your map that shows the quality, the current pavement conditions. And the council's had a work session talking about how they try to get those pavement conditions up a little bit. This 3.4 is going to help a little, but we got a long ways to go. So.
Yes, Councilor.
Reminded me that when you said bicycle footpath goes to sidewalks, is that specifically public owned sidewalks?
Yes. Anything else in street? The assessment fund, this is here in case we create or have created a special assessment project or district. We have a location that is and has been for a number of years, kind of right on the edge of teetering to become an LID, a local improvement district. They've got enough non-remonstrances, and if they get another development there, it'll kick it into it. And so these are then the funds that, as approving the local improvement district, they would be paying for those improvements that would be made, and they would be making payments back in here that would be the income, and we'd spend the money. We'd actually go out and borrow the money, essentially, to do the project first, and they'd be paid it back. So it's just there in case those things happen, and we put money in case it happens that it's there. Police communications, these are the 911 funds that we received for the operation of our 911 point, public safety answering point, as well as our dispatching. And so we handle our communications out of this. Those funds have to be put into, according to state law, into this separate fund and used in that way. So we have our support services for communications as well as our 911, and this is where you'll see that additional dispatcher. It went down by 3, and we had it up by 4, so we got that additional. And they're full now, for now. Just hired a week or two ago, yeah. Luke. Any questions on communications or 911 or support? Our narcotics forfeiture fund, this is basically a fund that is there accounting for narcotic forfeiture funds that we've received over a long period of time. They can only be used for specific purposes, and we generally are not receiving much revenue into this anymore as a result of changes in state laws. But we primarily use it for training and functions with the canines and for other enforcement.
So this is one of the funds that suffered from Measure 110.
Actually, it was suffering well before Measure 110.
Okay. But yeah. 110, I'm sure, did it again?
No, because that was primarily marijuana and the tax there. This one was impacted by essentially our own legislator passing bills that you can't use the funds and you can't get the forfeitures that you used to be able to get, and it had to go back to the others.
Our assistant to the city manager probably remembers. I remember the debate when that happened. That was a lot of years ago.
Yeah. And the fund's just been kind of sitting here
So
dying.
basically, folks, before you could take items before somebody was convicted, and then after the fact, you had to be convicted for it to go in here, and it dramatically reduced the amount going in.
So it was like ill-gotten gain, so it was compensated after conviction.
So now it's after conviction. Before that, they could actually do forfeitures, whether somebody was convicted or not.
Wow, thank you. Didn't know that.
And then we have our bicycle and footpath fund. This is where the money from the street fund comes into. This is where we do projects on the bike path. We do sidewalk work. We do some ADA stuff on sidewalks as well. But a lot of it also comes out of our SDCs when we have an intersection or something to do. Any questions on that? With the acquisition of the new property that we have behind from Weyerhaeuser, we're anticipating developing a little more path back there and continuing that path service from 6th Street on down through behind, basically over to Grant Street, Grant Avenue. Yeah.
That's a huge addition to it.
Our building inspections program is another special revenue monitored and audited by the Department of Labor and Department of Business Services. And making sure that what goes in this fund stays in this fund and that we're actually using it for building inspection program. Our building inspection program provides building inspections for the city of Cottage Grove, Creswell, Coburg, and Bonita. And so we have funds or revenue coming in from those other cities to help support this this fund. And we have 3 inspectors now. We have the electrical inspector, our building official, and then Melanie has gotten her residential inspection. So the program's doing really well. The other cities love the service that they're getting as well. So it's a great program.
I'd also just point out, you might see that the total revenue and total expenses went up considerably. This past year, we experienced some pretty good revenues, lots of growth in the community. And so our construction excise tax, we normally budgeted it for $100,000, and it's probably, you'll see a supplemental budget coming forward. It's gonna, I think we're pretty close to twice that much this year. So, the success of the program is what's causing revenue expenses.
And that's not our money. We collect it. The school districts in the state of Oregon have the opportunity to levy a construction excise tax. And so we get to collect it for them, and then they get it. And so it's a lot like the chamber's transient room tax. We have to budget it at a point where what comes in is actually going to go out to them.
4% administration costs.
So we've raised that up to 200,000 in hopes that that's enough. We won't pay them 200 if it doesn't come in. It's only what comes in goes back to them. We get a 4% for administration though.
Yes, Councilor.
So are we doing like a larger transfer to contingency in this? If it's doing really well, are we putting money aside for that? Or what benefit do we have if it's doing really well other than inviting more?
So you'll see our carry forwards larger this year than most of the past. We're factoring in a larger contingency. So there's really more revenue in the fund that's available for operations. And then this year we doubled the transfer to reserve fund from 25 to 50. A portion of that, some of the thought was there that we are fully funded in the Housing Assistance Trust Fund. You might remember the SDC fees that nonprofits can apply for assistance from the council and also building permit fees. So that fund's fully funded, so we just doubled took that money and projected it.
Was that 75,000 a year?
It's 25 out of here a year to the max of 50 out of this, and then out of the general fund, it's a max of 150. So, and we've hit the 200 there in that assistance fund. So the program said you stop when you hit that max. So.
And then just one sort of curiosity, what grant is for $25? It was like 2 years ago.
And it's an audited figure, and get to where you're looking at, the $25.
Federal grant, $25.
I can't tell you exactly what that might have been off the top of my head, other than it may have been posted incorrectly, but it was audited, so it's there, and I can't move it.
Any other questions?
Housing rehabilitation, this is, I think, one remaining loan in the housing rehab program that we still have on our books in our system. It is federal money, so when it's paid back, it has to go back into a housing rehab program. We have transferred, how many years ago? Probably 8 or 10 years ago. We transferred all of our other loans into the regional program because the rules changed and you had to, and those are being administered by St. Vincent de Paul.
And I think there's around 100 or 150K, do you remember?
Right
now?
Yeah, right now it's
Available,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wow. That's one of the concerns.
Yeah, and so it's a program that, hey, if people need it for rehab on their house for insulation and stuff like that, it's a great program. People need to apply, and
Thank you for that, Mr. I was not aware of that.
yeah. Anything else in special revenues? Enterprise fund. These are our funds that are basically treated like businesses. They're special operations. They bring revenue in. Those revenues pay for their operation and functions. So we have our water, our wastewater, our stormwater, industrial parks, industrial park operations. These are our enterprise funds. The first one's water. Our carryover is down a little bit as we're seeing the current budget eat away at the carryover, the additional expenses that are occurring there. And when we get to the internal support department, you'll see what's going on with the contingencies and the carryover and the reserve fund contributions there. The first portion of this is water distribution. This is pipes in the road from the treatment plant. So this is maintaining the 49 miles of pipes, I think, yeah, 49 miles of water pipes under the road. We don't have any aerial water pipes in town. So the previous city I was in did have aerial water line, so it was interesting, but went up over the river and it leaked crazy too. But you'll see our fuel and lubricants are up here. Our chemicals are not as up here as much as they are in the wastewater. We just generally don't use them in the distribution, but you'll see it in the treatment. Anything else stand out there? Today?
No, I think that the main challenge is as we move forward. This year we went to purchasing our chemicals in bulk, and we're in the process of installing bulk tanks to store that. In the past, we received our chemicals at 55 pounds of totes, so we're able to get a better price for the chemicals. So this distribution portion is fairly in pretty good shape. The bulk chemicals I'm talking about, I'm sorry, we're area production side. On the distribution side, we don't use as much chemicals, just the fuel costs.
Yes, Councilor Savage.
Thank you, Councilor Roberts. I see that contractual services went down. Is that?
Yeah, so contractual services in the most for this fund, mostly what gets tapped into is if we replace a water line or make a water line repair, it's in the street, so we could contract with the paving company and repay that. That's generally all of the contractual services.
Thank you for clarifying.
You'll notice also the credit card processing fees are up in these departments because we do accept credit card payments. The credit card percentage is now over 50% of the citizens use credit cards to pay their water bills. The pandemic boosted that up tremendously. I think we were in the high 30s or 40s, and then
Yes,
it
that much.
finished it up to over 50%. So and as a result of that, we have credit card processing fees that have increased.
This is Mr. Schultz.
Make a recommendation. Can we pass that on to the other person?
We've tried, and we
No.
can't. The law says
It's just
we
not
can't.
legal?
No.
Because I know the gas stations and some of the other
Some
businesses
of
are doing
there
it,
are
but-
some businesses that are allowed to do it, but there is a very select few.
Yeah, okay. I think Lane County charges, if you want to pay your property tax, there's like $1.50 a check. They use a third party.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not good. What, is that 4% now, or what is that?
Let's hear.
Our third-party charges range depending on the type of card that you use. And we do not accept American Express. Just say.
And some are a certain number of transactions per month, some are per
Correct.
transaction. What do we
Right. You get charged from Springbrook Software for using your card. We have a fee on that. We have a fee for the actual card itself. We have, it's varied. And it depends on how many we get per month, et cetera. And then there's also charges through our bank for it. So
Yeah, I mean, is that factored in eventually?
it would be
to the
factored into
rates?
your rate.
Yes.
So when FCS Group looks at the expenditures, they're going to look at this and say, oh, this is your cost for doing business, and this is what your rate needs to be. But I can't charge the person that's using the card and more than the person that isn't legally.
So everybody pays for credit card use.
Oh, I wouldn't.
I feel bad for getting average on all but yes.
You're not the only one.
But if you use your debit card, it's cheaper,
Per transaction, but it still costs us money.
but you don't get the benefits.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry, Counselor Soulful.
Just out of curiosity, you can't pass on that charge and you charge less for cash. Make an incentive to get that turn around.
I don't think so.
You know, we've thrown around the idea of, oh, let's give you a discount if you pay your bill on time, right? So that we're not sending out the disconnect notices, those sorts of things. Hasn't really come to fruition yet. We'll talk about that some more. But we want to reduce the number of people that we shut their water off for. And if we were to do that, we'd still have to build that incentive into the rate because we have so many, the cost is the cost. But reducing our costs by not having to send out 200 disconnect notices every month would be beneficial.
Well, it costs money to send the people up to turn those off.
Well, yes.
Yes,
So
Mr.
I'm
Williams.
assuming that court fines are also paid with cards as well.
And we can charge a fee with
That was
those.
a Genesis way that.
Yeah, and the fee can be charged there.
It's a convenience fee.
Interesting. Yeah, you're right, that one first.
So, anything else on distribution?
Any other questions?
Production is where this is the treatment plant where we actually clean the water and get it ready so it's safe to drink. We have an award-winning water treatment plant. I mean, they do a phenomenal job. The city was, when we built the plant and went with the membrane system, it was a huge improvement on water treatment and the quality of water that we have. And so this is great. We have actually purchased, and I think out of the reserve fund, we've purchased 20 new cartridges, and we're using those as we need them to replace. But we've got cartridges that have been on there since we built the original cartridge plant that are still operating. And Paul came and they took one out and did a post-mortem analysis on the cartridge, and they were impressed at how well we're keeping them clean and how well they're still functioning. They're beyond their life, but they're not even at 20.
Yeah, they're still in like condition. But I will tell you, this past year we did have a problem with some of the membranes plugging. And the only thing that we've been able to, our operators have been able to determine what caused that is the forest fires. The release of ash and various different products that were released into the air. It got in and plugged the fire. We've since been able to figure out how to flush them and get them cleaned up. But that's what really encouraged us to buy the additional membranes to have on in the plant. And then we really do, they're 10 years old. We would like to start a process of replacement as we can.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilor.
Do those things degrade in storage or in use or both?
It's my understanding they have to be stored properly, because if they're not stored properly, they will degrade. So I'm not 100% sure. I think there's actually fluid in them to keep them moist so that they don't harden and become brittle and not operational. So there is a recommended way to store them and keep them for an extended period of time.
So to purchase now, you're going to use space, material, inspection. You might not realize much gain from getting them ahead of time.
So we're actually going to install those new ones that we purchased, and we'll save the best ones, and the ones we replace will be as spares on the shelf, and then we'll do the same thing again as we have the resources to do it by ones.
Richard, I have a question, sort of off subject, but subject. Are we going to ever reconvene those tours that we stopped?
We haven't done it yet, but we will. We're planning on doing that coming up probably. I think we were looking at in June's right around the corner. I think we were looking at June, but it may be July. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Move forward.
Okay.
On the Paul membranes, are we talking, those were installed in early 2000, right? 2000?
Yeah.
Because the original plant was built like in 92, whatever. So when we're talking about the degradation of these Paul filters, they're from the newest.
Yeah. Yeah, because we switched from the rapid sand filtration to the membranes when we made that change. We have installed another rack, so we do have one more rack in the facility now, and we just installed that this last year. Yeah, so, and they're up and operational as well. So now we're at 6 million gallons of capacity out of the plant. And we have one more rack we can put in, so we have it plumbed and ready to go, and we just would install the additional rack when it's ready. The internal support department, this is those expenses again that cross across. Our insurance and bonds don't show that they're up here, but our insurance costs have increased. Last year we budgeted a pretty high amount as well, so that's probably why the budgeted amounts are the same. But we're actually, and this is not necessarily for this fund, but it's for all of the funds. Our insurance company is no longer providing cybersecurity insurance. If you want it, you get a $50,000 free with your general liability. But if you want any excess coverage, and we've had excess coverage over the last 3-4 years, you have to go through a security assessment. And then you have to pay $500 for this initial assessment, and you have to do this whole package of things that we've evaluated, and some of those are extremely expensive to do. So what we're looking at right now for our cybersecurity, because included in cybersecurity is your security associated with documents and materials that you have confidential information on. It's not always cyber. We have a filing cabinet with personnel information and stuff in it, and if something happens there, that's covered under the cybersecurity. So what we're doing this year with our insurance is we're pulling ransomware out, and we're pitching that to insurance companies saying, don't cover us for ransomware, and can we get a package that would cover the costs we need to cover for any of the other breaches that may occur with data and materials that don't fall under the cybersecurity. We're having pretty good success with our insurance agent. He says, yeah, pulling the ransomware out is good because they're all afraid of ransomware. what we've done to protect ourselves from ransomware is we have a pretty extensive and robust system for our backups and our cloud system for maintaining the security of our system. So, and we have a brand new server that's monitoring things constantly on what's going on. So we're pretty confident that we're safe there. Most of the companies are refusing to even cover ransomware anymore. But to give you an idea of what we're using, I don't want to go too much into detail on it, but the system we're using, because LCOG used it, and I think it was 2 years ago, they had a failure of their network. Their server crashed and they couldn't access their server at all. They went to this backup system and they ran off this backup system for a year. And that's the system that we now have. That we can, if we have a major breach or problem or ransomware gets in and locks up our system, we can switch automatically within minutes to this other software and this other program and be up and running and not have that issue. And there's 2 versions of it out there in the world, so and it's constantly updated.
Are court records part of the records that are held here?
Some of those are the documents, the paper documents are held here, yes.
Digitally, what's the what would be at risk?
If there was a breach of our paper records, you've got birth dates and driver's license information on some of those. So those would be the confidential pieces that we're trying to protect. More and more of our court records are going digital, though, on the computer software. But we still have paper documents of payments and stuff like that.
Digitally. Digitally specifically.
Yeah, the digitally ones.
For residents, so I would imagine you have to have PCI compliance.
Right. Yeah.
Card information, so there's financial information.
And that's the stuff we want to protect outside of ransomware. That's where we want to get the red flag stuff and protect that stuff because it's not ransomware. Typically, that's the issue with it. It's the exposure of data that we want to prevent. So.
With the 2 separate networks, is the police or the 3, right? The 3 separate networks, are they all on the same system?
Yes, yes. Everything is on. They're separated because they have to be, but everything is on that system. Yeah. And we've run everything through. Everything's running through the same firewall, I believe now, and it's a brand new firewall that we have. Yeah.
Any questions?
Anything else on? We kind of left the internal support department of water, but anything else on internal support water? And we'll move to wastewater, sewer. Here's where we operate our wastewater treatment plant, our wastewater collection system. We don't distribute sewer, we collect wastewater. So it's the reverse of the distribution system. Basically, I mean, it's the same, it's just dirty stuff. About the same number of pipes, miles of pipes. We're continuing to improve our manholes. We saw huge benefits from relining manholes that we had. So we've seen a lot of reduction in our infiltration and inflow. So, I mean, some of the storms that this week we've had, have we hit 13 yet this year?
Back, I think in December we did.
Okay.
But just this past week's, the highest we were at was 7 million.
Yeah. And, 3 years ago with the storm that we had this week, we would have been at 13. I mean, so that's the difference that it's made in doing the manholes that we've been doing. So we're trying to do, 15 or 20 of them a year? Yeah.
Is that where you line the inside of them? Keep that seepage from coming through?
Right.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're finding, and the first ones we did were the brick ones, the old brick manholes. We actually have some of those still, and they're working. It's just that, water comes right into where the mortar used to be. And so resealing those seals those right up, and they're brand new.
I got a tour of the ones on Main Street.
Yeah. Wastewater treatment. This is where we have the expenses for our wastewater treatment. You'll see in the pictures there's a little green semi-truck with purple pipe on it. For those of you who don't know what purple pipe means, that's the official color of pipe that handles effluent. It has to run in purple pipe. And if you have sprinklers that are running it, they have a little purple washer on them. So it lets people know that that's effluent. And that's some of the regulations associated with doing that. The other thing you might want to notice down here, we have the big thing on there that says wipes clog pipes, don't flush them, even if it says they're flushable. Do not flush wipes. The only thing that should go down the toilet is number one, number two, and TP. Don't put the other stuff down there. And you'll see the little picture off to the side is one of our experiences during the pandemic where we believe that because a lot of people were using more wipes and stuff, we had massive plugs in our wastewater treatment plant. And our crew had to dig those out, and a lot of them they had to dig out by hand, and it's a mess. This one is at our, I think that's our screen right up the headworks there in the picture. Yeah, we had one of our clarifiers actually clog up completely that it wouldn't get through, and they had to unplug that by hand and get down there and get that out. So please, important, don't flush wipes.
Yes, Mr. Salisbury.
I'm sorry to back up just for a second. On the wastewater collection, the fuel costs there, I noticed most of your fuel, you're doing about 20-30% probably increases, which has been pretty consistent, but this one's double. Is there a reason why that one double? Are you expecting something new on fuel and lubricants for?
And we have generators there as well for pump stations. So those are in that. And
so I would also share that with the retirement of a long-term employee that did our accounts payable, she had created tables with percentages, and every time a bill came in, she just applied the percentages to it. So what we're doing now is it's actually applying the true cost of fuel overages. So there was a lower percentage in wastewater collection than truly represented what our fuel costs are. So
I figured there was a reason. I just was curious what it was.
Okay. That's the reason.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And you'll notice at the treatment plant, the fuel cost is not as much because they're not out driving around with the 49 miles of pipe. Yeah.
Councilor Urban?
The biosolids dryer, there's $200,000 of our money set aside for that. How does that relate to the biosolids disposal? Do we expect to see, so the understanding was that it's going down to Sutherland, but if we can keep it here, save that cost.
So as you can see, our biosolids costs have gone considerably. I think we saw a 33% increase this year from Hertz Farm. What is hoped is that we would be able to install a dryer for biosolids and dry it to a Class A level. Class A will allow them to be applied essentially anywhere for lawns, plants, anywhere that folks generally use fertilizer. And we would be able to take the product that we create and we would be able to use it on city properties. We would also potentially be able to distribute it to citizens in the community. We could also sell it. I recommend that we sell it, provided that we have a good product to sell. My hope is that we would save money in the long run. We would reduce those haulage costs for biosolids right now, which is close to $80,000.
Yes.
And then we would also see, because by doing this, we would change the process of how we treat and operate the sewer treatment plant. So right now, everything goes through certain steps. And what would end up happening is we would be able to eliminate a couple of the steps in the process, which would reduce our energy consumption. So we would not only be able to save the treatment costs, but energy consumption and make the process quicker. So instead of going completely through the plant when they got to the clarifiers, we'd be able to go directly from the clarifier to the dryer, dry the product, and be done with it. So we are start the design process for that. And once we get the clarifier done, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward and get the dryer installed.
Okay, so the clarifier was estimated maybe August if things go well.
So the clarifier right now is that council's approved purchase of the manufacturing of the actual mechanism, the dry mechanism for the clarifier. That's going to be produced, and it's supposed to be completed and on site in December of this year, by the end of December. We will not actually start physically rebuilding the concrete portion that mechanism fits in until most likely July of 2023. So the project, the actual completion from inserting the new mechanism, the process will be completed, we believe, by October 2023.
This was the biosolids design phases. After that, could you do the design up to that point, or do you need some?
We would start to design if council approves the EPA funds are being proposed, at least this amount. West Yost would be able to start the design as soon as we ask them to do it. In fact, I was asking them today. So we'd have the design done, then we can do some costing, and it might very well be that product, we just have to look at our revenues, might see if we wanted to borrow the money to get it done, but we would make a proposal, we might be able to get that project moved in at the same time as the clarifier.
Is that the only project on the books that has real potential cost savings right now? The biosolids project.
Washington Street, 400,000 street projects.
Yeah, I'm thinking that right now, what's being proposed, that's probably the one that would save the most money. I don't know if the street projects would save money for us, other than our routine, our regular maintenance would go down that section of it. So I guess there is a portion of that savings. The biggest is drivers.
Yeah, I guess why is that dependent on sweeping arm? Is that as far as students goes? Projects.
On the sweeping arm, as far as getting the clarifier completed. So the challenge is that, and I wasn't comfortable with saying we're going to do that project this year because there was a tight timeline to getting the mechanism built. We have a short window of time, most likely from July 1st until maybe October, where our flows are low enough where we can completely shut down one of the clarifiers. So we have that window to work in. If we're not done completed with the reconstruction of that clarifier by November 1st, I believe we're really probably we'll be living on prayer that we don't have a rainstorm come in and we need both clarifiers to operate.
Like a labor constraint.
So what I was concerned with is, yes, labor, getting it done, and actually having materials. One of the things that we've struggled with over the last couple of years is actually finding motors, electrical, and just basic electrical pieces that the electrical company, panels and various different things are in short supply. So I wanted to make sure that all that stuff was purchased on site, so we're ready to go when that window of assessment takes place. And I wasn't comfortable for this year with that taking place.
Well, I guess so. The end of that would be if the biosolids dryer redesign, we'll be looking at possibly 2024.
It could be sooner. We get the design and we understand what the costs are going to be. There are grant opportunities out there for these type of projects. We can also go to the Energy Trust for the potentially contribute to the project because of the energy savings. And so then we would shift to how can we acquire the resources to make it happen sooner. But if we're going to rely on our rates and what they're set at in our capital improvement plan, we'll probably look at 2024 if that's where it ends up going down.
Because that 200,000 is just a fraction of what.
Oh yeah, we're talking about a project that be very close to $1 million, maybe $1 million quarters. So, thank you.
Any questions? Councilor Cottage?
Thank you, Councilor Roberts. I want to go back to the wastewater fund as well. I see soil, sand, and gravel in 19 and 20 was fairly low, and then it jumped in 2021, and then it's low again in 21, 22, and now we're jumping again in 22, 23. What's the reason for the waves?
So generally it's dependent on projects. And so one of the large expenses that's going to be in this fund is actually putting the well pipe in the ground. And so we purchase and vet our pipe with rock. And so that's why we're experiencing this year, because we have 2,000 feet of pipe right now in storage ready to go in the ground, and we have an additional 2,000, it's about 4,000 feet of that pipe in the project. And so the rock that needs to be vetted in that pipe is but that's why it's good enough so much.
And then using the street sweeper remains kind of pad that, so that's separate?
Yeah, so we could use some of that product in there, but we're talking about in one day we could use 14,000, 140 yards of rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Just in one day, and we may not collect that in a couple of months. So the other thing we'll use those sweeper tailings for is that we also collect a lot of our leaves during the leaf pickup. We're kind of creating a composting pile with sweeper tailings. So this summer we'll use power screen, we'll screen the product, and we'll create kind of a soil enhancement product too. So whenever we got a project where we need to cap the surface off with some soil, we would use that product.
Thank you.
So, and anything else in treatment? Because a lot of that was collections. Golf course is in our wastewater fund because they're a part of the wastewater treatment process as they take the effluent and use it there. The pandemic has been exceptionally nice to golf. Before the pandemic, golf around the country and the world was something that people were saying that was diminishing. It's now not, and is doing very well. We're seeing amazing days and weekends of golf play that are bringing in revenue and supporting this fund, as well as providing the service that we need for the wastewater treatment plant. Any other questions on wastewater and golf course? The internal support department. Again, same thing as the others. You'll notice though the transfer for the reserve is $100,000, and our contingency is down to 102 in wastewater, and this is even with the 12% increase. So it's not really good, and so this is one of those that when we have FCS look at it, what do we need to do here in wastewater as well? Any questions there on wastewater? Moving to storm drainage. This is our storm drain utility. Take care of the stormwater system and maintain that. Our carryover this year was remarkably low, $84,500. We're coming in low, and then our storm drainage fees are basically staying the same because there's no increase. There hasn't been an increase in stormwater for 4 years, 5 years, 3 years.
I'm thinking it's at least 3 years.
Yeah. So there's been no increase there. And so you see the contingency is $58,000, and the transfer to the storm drain reserve is 0 there. And the $40,000 is going out of the stormwater to the street fund to help pay for street sweeping, paying that portion of street sweeping. which is down from previous years as well. The stormwater system doesn't have any pumps in it, so we don't have any pumps. Yeah, we don't have any pump stations in stormwater. So that if with having a $50,000 contingency is, if we had pumps, that would be really scary. But since we don't have any pumps, it's not quite as scary. It's mainly just pipes and stuff. But that is something that is a little concerning there. And the reserve being zero, that's not good. Any questions on storm drain?
What is the plan for boosting that reserve?
That's part of the FCS group. We'll be looking at those rates and seeing, what's happened, where has the economy gone, why is it doing this, and then they'll be proposing some adjustments to rates. Industrial Park Operation Fund, we have a number of pieces of property that are on contract to possibly buy, and so they need to sell. And we are pressuring one of the person who has a couple of those sites on contract, and we'll be coming to the council in a future meeting here shortly with some proposals of purchasing some of those. So that'll put this fund back in line. We're starting with a very low carryover, and it is basically paying the loan payments for the development of the park and the industrial properties with those sales of property. So if those other properties, the person who has 3 properties on contract, if they buy all 3 of those, we'll be able to pay off, I think, all of our loans off of those 3, and we'll still have some additional pieces. So in the existing industrial park, we have 4. Is it 4? Yeah. And then we also have the newly purchased Workman Fox, where we've only divided off the piece that went to King Estates, and we've made that switch. And the other portion of it has not been, the wetlands have not been delineated in it, and then we do that and subdivide that once we get our street through, and we'd have more properties. So.
Yeah. If those all sell, what's the fund look like from there? Does it always exist? Is there maintenance that's going on with it?
Right. If all the property sells, we will still have some public lands in the industrial park that we have to take care of. So we will either switch that into the general fund to take care of those properties that we have the sidewalks and planting strips and stuff like that, or we'll leave them in there if we have revenue, but more than likely we'll move them eventually.
There's also, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's debt that will need to be serviced through this fund until it's gone. So the sale of property allows us to pay debt that's in the future payments.
So I understood you say if we sell the properties, it would cover all the debt, we wouldn't just pay it off.
And we may not be able to pay it off early, so we'll have to hold on to it until we get to the point where we can do those early payments.
For bond sales, sometimes they limit the amount that you can prepay, and we would have to look at that specifically at the time we have the money available on what we could actually pay off and avoid interest.
Okay. Is it because of the zoning that the sidewalks are not under the care of the property owners, or how does that work?
We have some public spaces in there as well. So that's what we're taking care of associated with that. If there's sidewalks adjacent to the other property owners, then they're taking care of those, but the public space part, we'd be taking care of those planting strips and stuff in that area. Yeah.
A portion of Counselor is we created a wetlands mitigation area to mitigate all the wetlands that were in the first purchase of the industrial park. So there is some maintenance obligations to that land, and so that's some of the area costs.
And that's all along Sweet Lane.
It's
that behind.
A portion of it's along Sweet Lane, but it's really parallel to the existing park. I could send you a map and show you exactly where it is, but it's a long strip on the west side of the industrial park municipality.
And then when R eventually goes through there, is that the street fund purchasing property from the industrial park, or is that already, does it?
That's already designated, and so they don't have to purchase it. And so it's already built actually in the industrial park, except for the new Workman piece. But that would be all SDC money and streets, but primarily SDC because it's wide enough and meets that requirement for capacity.
Part of the original purchase of the property, we determined the amount of land that was needed for the R Street extension, and the SDC fund paid for that strip of land through there already.
This doesn't say that there's a prepayment.
You have to look at that for which bond issue.
Yeah, the existing loans are with the USDA, and typically they don't allow early payment on those. So we'd have to look at it for sure. And it's the last payments in 2020, in 2033. So we'd be holding on to it until then. Yeah. Anything else on the special revenue? Those are special revenues. No, enterprise funds. Or the industrial park. The capital projects funds, and we can do these all real quick because they're all exactly the same except they're just different things. These are where the SDC, the system development charges for water, wastewater, storm, street, and park go. What we do in these funds, because we don't know if a developer is going to come in and build a subdivision, and if they do that and they have intersections, our streets and our water and the street primarily, but then any water or something that's in intersections or in the piece that would be connecting to others, the SDCs would pay for those. And so we have the revenue coming in and all of the money marked as expenditures either in contractual or engineering or building and improvements. So essentially, if everything happened in one of these funds, we would zero out the fund. It's set up that way on purpose so that anything might happen, we can use it in all of these. So in our water system, we have a 1.4 million set aside for building and improvements. So this is where some of the reservoir projects are at. So the properties we're purchasing for reservoirs, those could be used. If we got those squared away, we'd be building reservoirs with some of this money and operating that. Wastewater system, there's $228,000 in there for the capital improvements. If something came along that used wastewater is a little more difficult for us.
So take for instance on wastewater, we have a potential project that's in the process of being located at the airport. And it's going to require sanitation lines. So because this is an extension for capacity into the airport, we can use SDC funds to pay for that lateral extension into the airport at a certain amount. So that's typically the type of project. As Richard says, so let's say a developer comes in and they're developing the property and they need a 40-foot wide road, but our transportation system shows them a 60-foot wide road. Our SDC funds would pay for that additional capacity, future additional road. That's where that SDC funds get spent. So very similar in parks. As we expand parks, we create more capacity. That's where you can see the parks SDC spend.
Under the scenario, let's say they expanded on the infrastructure to include purple pipes to different areas, would that be an SDC kind of thing?
Purple pipe is not in the SDC CIPs.
No, it's not. It wasn't recognized as projects. Normally what happens is we create a capital improvements plan and adopt it. Once we get our master plan going, we'll have to do CIP and make it purple pipe then. And then it could be an expense. It has to be recognized.
And what's being transferred over in the middle field, that's purple pipe?
Right, that's
so when that was built out, did that just fall under project costs?
Yeah, didn't use SDC funds at all for that.
And that's going to Bohemia for that?
Parallel to Bohemia, and then hopefully later years we'll expand it to like Kelly Field, Winter Park, and then as testimony was tonight, there's a possibility that as we go by properties, and if they want to convert their irrigation over to treated effluent, as we go by the properties, they could hook up and use treated effluent instead of drinking water, which conservation plan.
The other piece that we haven't talked about too is the effluent pond, and along the purple pipe, we've also put hydrants, and the pond can actually be dipped in. So we've created some additional fire protection out of the effluent water as well. The effluent pond by the wastewater treatment plant, the large one you see up the connector. Yeah.
And we have a system, I hope it wasn't a dream I had, where there was, even though people could go and buy bulk water, there was some kind of different things.
Presently, we sell bulk water, drinking water, and we accommodate that right now at the city shop. One of the hopes is that we would have an actually distribution point where people can go hook up their own hose, put their credit card or their payment system in, and fill up their tank and go away. I'd like to do the same thing with the effluent. We create an opportunity for folks to purchase the effluent. Very similar to that. What we would do right now, I would working with Danny in regards to the fire service, is that he'll know where these fire hydrants will be, and if he needs to fill a tanker truck, the fire department would have that option if there's no water service where they're fighting fire. The other thing is that we can use it for construction projects. A lot of times, dirt work requires water to be on the site for compaction purposes. We'll be able to use this water instead of drinking water.
And that might be something we'd see on a future budget when we want to plan those things out.
Yep.
Mr. Soulsby?
The effluent pond, it has a membrane, correct? So I would suggest we use that as a last resort for dipping, because the river's right there too.
Yeah.
And even ponds at the golf course or something.
Yes.
If we damage that membrane.
And we do have the hydrants right there too, so those would work.
I just go dip somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Soulsby.
I was just wondering about the part, there's a master plan of stormwater, wastewater, stormwater. I was wondering about the process of development of this.
They're in process. We're getting started on that. That's what the city engineer is working on and finishing up getting that out so that the engineers will start producing that for us here.
Will there be an opportunity for public input on this?
There is a public process associated with those master plans as they come to the council. Yes. Yeah. I think, do they go to the work with the planning commission as well?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's been 10 years or 15 years. Yeah. So there's a process. Yeah.
We are approaching 9 o'clock. Do we want to push through? We're almost done with this.
Yeah, I mean, we have the reserve funds and the trust funds left.
So let's just push through. I just want to let you know we're at our time. Thank you. Thank you, committee.
Any other questions on the SDCs? The reserve funds, we have our general reserve. These are the funds, and you'll note in the overview, there's a brief description of what it says in the resolution that establishes those funds. So it gives a brief description of what they can be used for. The general reserve to acquire equipment, vehicles, properties, or buildings, or to make major repairs or capital improvements, construct facilities, or to conduct contractual services related to general fund activities or programs of the city of Cottage Grove. So a little wide, but it's only for those major expenditures associated with those kind of projects. Carryover of 110, we have a transfer of 579, but you'll notice that 50,000 of it is ARPA, and then 270,000 is ARPA as well, and the rest is just general fund money coming into the reserve fund there. The contractual services for 50,000 of ARPA is, I have to go back and look. It's on my chart. General fund is broadband improvements. No, broadband improvements is 250 is low income housing, and there's also 70,000 in there in the 200 in the buildings and improvements. ARPA is for a new saddle span cover. The old saddle span cover was used when it was purchased. And this would be a brand new one. It's well beyond its life because we store it well and everything and take care of it, but it'd be nice to have a new one. This one's starting to get little pinholes in it. So
how old is the other one?
What was the age when it was, what, 5 when we bought it?
I believe it was manufactured in 2004.
Wow.
So We bought it 6 years ago, I think.
I can't, it seems like
I believe
we've
it was
always
6
had
years
it.
ago.
That's amazing, that's good.
It's well past its expected life.
We got our money's worth out of it.
Yeah. So those are the ARPA expenditures in here. Yeah. Any other questions in general reserve? Water reserve? This is bringing in the water from the reserve funds from, and the surcharge from the water bills coming here as well. And here's where the debt service is transferred out. And so that's what generally what those surcharges are for, is to get into the reserve fund to help pay for the bonds and the debt associated with projects. Some is there to build revenue so that it's there for future projects rather than having to borrow as well.
And ARPA funds in the water reserves program for design of reservoir.
The 140,000 there. Wastewater reserve, revenue coming in from the wastewater surcharge. It goes into paying the debt payment as well there, with a little bit left over to help build revenue for future projects. We have ARPA for contractual services in there for contractual services. That's $100,000 to design the drying system that we were talking about earlier. And then in the capital outlay, we have $100,000 there to assist with laying the purple pipe, getting that in the ground, and continuing to extend that out towards Bohemia Park and Trailhead. Anything else? Storm drainage. This is a storm drain reserve. You'll notice there is no transfer in from the storm drain fund, and we do have the surcharge bringing in $600 there to help with the debt and pay some of the costs for future projects. We do have $2 million in projects lined up there to possibly work on and develop. You'll see one of the things that the storm drainage program did is, and we used other funds as well, but remove those two big redwood trees that were damaging the storm system and the street and the sidewalk and everything else, planted in a planting strip many, many years ago as a small little tree, but it shouldn't have been put there because they get big. And then the building reserve, the building inspection reserve we talked about a little bit. This is one different than all the others because it does have operations in it if we have a downturn in the economy. But we have some money set aside for possible motor vehicles. Not that we're planning, I don't think we're planning on buying anything there, but in case something does fail, we want to make sure we can get one and keep the system and the program running, because those vehicles are dedicated to the building inspection program for all of the cities. And so we want to make sure that that's there to be able to continue to do that. And we have $1,000 there to transfer to the building inspection fund in case we do have a downturn. We could put money into that line item and transfer it over. So the 1,000 is just there as a whole placeholder to make sure we have that line to do it with. Anything else on the reserves? Trust funds. These are trust funds that are basically, they contain our debt service fund. This is the one fund that every year with our auditor, we talk about, yes, we want to keep it this way. And they talk about, no, we want you to do it a different way, but we like doing it this way because it shows all of our debt in one place rather than hidden throughout other departments. And this way we can see what our total debt package is for the city and what those payments are every year. So all of the funds that have debt associated with them transfer money in here to the debt service fund to pay those debt payments out of this fund. So you can look at those. Our housing assisted development cost assistance program, that is at its max under the ordinance that created it. When it hit $200,000, we stopped contributing into it until it goes back down in the next year. Then those funds would contribute to it. And this is primarily to fund and help programs of help provide assistance to nonprofit or governmental agencies that are building low-income housing in the community, and we help with SDCs with these and building permit fees.
We had a question from Councilor Urban.
Yeah, it was about the ARPA funds and the debt service. You said it's specifically prohibited to use ARPA funds to pay debts.
Right. Yeah, the ARPA funds cannot be used to pay any debt, even with the standard allowance. So you can't pay pension liabilities and you can't pay outstanding debt.
No, that's all the stuff that would be debt service.
Right.
All types of debt or.
Any debt. Yeah, the goal behind the federal government in doing the ARPA funds was to get it in new projects and things on the ground rather than paying for something that's already been built. And so that's why they put those specific, basically there's those three: pension funds, debt service funds, and to pay down taxes. They didn't want some entity to say, yeah, we're going to cut our taxes and use the ARPA funds. They won't let you do that either. The other special trusts, these are trusts for donations, and there's two pages of all the different kinds of donations we receive in trust to go into specific projects, and they're held there in trust for those. We account for them individually so that as interest accrues, it goes to those individual line items for those items. Ed Jinks Fund, that's an old one that we can only use interest. The others we can wipe out. But the Ed Jinks always has to have $3,000, and anything above that we can use for purchase of books in the library. And so you'll see that unappropriated balance in this. The others can all be wiped out and used in any year. But we generally like to keep these. They're kind of nice to have these trust funds and to continue to build them up. We have separated one of those trust funds out, and that's the Armory Trust Fund, just because of the number of sizes of some of the donations that we've been receiving and some of the grants. So we could account for those specifically for the Armory. We don't have a lot of expenses or revenue coming in for the Mayor's Ball or the ice cream social that we normally do, just because we're trying to get out of the pandemic, and we'll let that go for another year, and then we'll probably get that started again. We will, and we are planning on a Mayor's Ball this year, but not to the grandeur of years past. With all the expenses that we've had or the donations coming in. So that is basically the budget. We've just whipped through $46 million.
Thank you, Richard Myers. Do we have any final questions?
A quick question. I'm noticing we have a resolution to adopt, but I don't see it.
I didn't believe that we would get this far this evening, so staff went and prepared real quickly, and we have it available if you're interested.
Huh? It's BC8. Did it make it around?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I'm not sure how this works with the resolution and stuff, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm in favor of accepting this budget as presented, with the exception of one thing. And I think the $100,000 for the clinic should be pulled out of this, because I feel that the elected officials need to vote on that themselves and put that back in the budget if they so decide, because I think that's something that the community is passionate about, both directions. And I think from this committee, I would want to make a proposal that I'm behind and not part of that, and then let the city council decide about that $100,000 to go in there. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Best way to do that would be put it in contingency. What I'd suggest is, if you want to do that, then that money would move into contingency, and then the line item would be 0 for now and 100,000 in contingency, and then the council could move that with the adoption of the budget, if they so wish, or an amount of that into the line item from contingency.
Councilor,
Would you be suggesting putting contingency on that particular fund, or?
Yes, the general fund. That's the general fund. That would be, there's no contingency in the departments. Yeah.
Okay, so could we put really any one decision? Could we do that for, since we have two contentious topics, really, it seems like, could we do that for both of them? Both of us?
Both of them.
No, the shelter, and there was, shelter related and the health clinic.
Yeah, in the shelter related ones, you could pull the 610 is what I think it is it's only because 200 of it is already in contingency because it's carrying over into the 23-24 year. So it would only be $410,000 Get to this page because I can look at the summary faster. You pull both of those, the shelter operation that's in community services, zero that out and put that 200 in the contingency, and then the 210 that's a transfer from the general fund to the street SDC, just move that into contingency as well and leave the street SDC as zero for now. Transfer.
I can support a motion to adopt that tonight.
Should we do those as separate motions, I'm thinking? Should we do those as separate motions? One to pass the resolution, but first to do that amendment?
Yeah, I'd do those changes first before you do the resolution. Yeah, so that then the resolution is adopting the budget as it's been modified.
Remove those. So what was the first motion?
Well, I guess
There hasn't been one yet.
I'll make
Okay.
I don't know if I retained everything you said, but I would make a motion to move the 400. I guess I don't know, 10. But is it 200 plus 210, 87?
Yeah, 210,870 is the transfer to the street SDC to pay for the property.
So to move the 210,870 into general fund contingency, as well as the 400 slated for transfers to street fund from general fund into the general fund contingency.
What the street fund one you're going to transfer out? No, what you'd want to do is you'd want to do the community promotions 200 to the shelter operation into contingency as well.
What he said. Yeah, what he said. But
Community services, community services. Community services has the 200 shelter operation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I got caught up on the 400.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do I need to state that, or can I say, yes, I agree with that? And then you want a separate motion for the other
Well, I
one?
would do that first, and then we can
One at a time.
do the resolution and adopt the budget as amended.
So go ahead and do the 100,000 for the federally qualified health clinic that's in community promotions.
Community, that is in community promotions to the general
Fund contingency, yes.
That is the motion.
I second that.
So we have a motion with the second. Any other discussion on this?
And they're not off the table, they're just deferred for council.
Yeah. So the line items will still be zero, so they'll be there, but the contingency will be enlarged by the 410 for the shelters and the 100 for the federal qualified health clinic.
And then they'll have to be voted on through council.
If they want to pull them out of contingency and move them into those.
Okay, so no more discussion? We can call roll.
Counselor Urban? Counselor Fleck?
Aye.
Counselor Roberts?
Aye.
Counselor Savage?
Aye.
Counselor Solstein? Aye. Mayor Gowing?
Aye.
Amanda Gilbert? Danny Solstein?
Aye.
Gary Manley?
Aye.
Gary Williams?
Aye.
Tom Rust?
Aye.
Armando Garza?
Aye.
Dana Merriday?
Passed. So. Was there another one, or we just put those together?
Those two were together.
I think we're just doing the resolution.
What was that?
I think we're just doing the resolution.
Okay.
And if you're interested in doing the resolution, I would suggest in the now therefore, in the last line where it says taxes for the general fund and recommends that the attached budget as amended to the city council.
So what we just did.
Yeah, so it's it's making sure we're saying this as amended.
So that's been moved and seconded.
Well, any other discussion, final discussion on this?
I'm sorry,
Who was the second?
Mike was the motion and Greg was the second.
Thank you, Mr. Fleck. All right, so I guess we call roll.
Counselor Urban?
Aye.
Counselor Fleck. Counselor Roberts.
Aye.
Counselor Savage.
Aye.
Counselor Solzy. Mayor Gowling.
Aye.
Amanda Gilbert. Danny Solsby.
Aye.
Gary Manley. Gary Williams.
Aye.
Don Rust.
Aye.
Armando Garza.
Aye.
Dana Merriday.
So the amended resolution BC 8 to approve the budget is passed. So, I guess we are adjourned.
Oh, I can go to my other meeting.